Well, one option is like walking through how people have been given purpose over time. So how it started with like the main system of control was religion. And then as that died, it became spirituality, and how everyone fell into that and why it's the big trap. And how, if you just look at it, no one's fucking doing anything. And so in terms of the only way that you can actually tell what's real and what's not is look at the result of it.
I think
And that's why we're suggesting, huh?
I think that's pretty obvious, though. No.
To who, dude?
To who?
To who?
Like everyone knows religion is a fucking like trap.
Right.
There's so many people that are so religious.
Exactly, but they don't realize that spirituality is religion now, right?
They think that spirituality is the counter to religion. That's why people do it. They think, oh, I'm not religious. I'm spiritual. Like
Okay,
I've gone beyond this antiquated religion, not realizing it's just another control mechanism.
Yeah.
Just to make sure you never stand up, because all the stuff from religion, it's so fucking elitist. I mean, from spirituality.
How do you mean?
It's
elitist?
like follow the light, follow energy, follow your feelings. It's like you couldn't design a more perfect. Do you know what I mean?
Trap, like,
yeah, it's literally like bugs at one of those like zappers. Like, oh,
like you guys ever play with a cat and just get out a laser pointer?
Yeah,
that's what it is.
And you put the laser pointer on one of those bug zappers.
Oh wow.
Poor Sienna.
I mean, that's pretty much what it is. That's the channels. Just lead them over here.
Don't worry, it's contrast. It's contrast. Keep going.
People send like this stuff to me where it's like, we're going into the fifth dimension and all this bullshit. And it's like, I think they genuinely think, like, when I push back on it, that it's like, oh, you don't know about it. Like, you just don't get it. And it's like, I've already researched. I've already done all that. Like, I've already seen all that. I understand it better than you do. Because when a person says we're going to the fifth dimension, it's like, what the fuck does that mean? Well, it's a higher frequency of vibration. It's like, what does that mean? How does that practically look?
Yeah.
They just, you know what they think it is? Just you're going to feel better. That's all it is.
They think things are going to be taken care of for them.
And reality is set up to just automatically go there. That's how they're thinking. Because they have that starting point of, well, source is infinite love, blah, blah, blah. So we're just ultimately going there, and we're learning lessons along the way. And it's like, why do you need to learn lessons?
If we're already going there.
If the lesson that you're learning is just, it's all happening by itself. Like, that seems to be the only lesson that people are learning. So why do you need to learn that?
Like,
that was what was the barrier. Like, we couldn't all get there until you realized we were all getting there. Like, how is that? Why does it matter? How is that any different than the Christian who says Jesus died for my sins and he's washed away my sins? And you're like, how did that happen? Like, how did him dying in itself wash away the sins? What's the mechanics of that process?
Yeah.
And people think that, like, I mean, it's perfect because we live in a world where you have to compete to survive. If you don't have enough money, you can't get the things that you need. You're totally limited by how much money you have, right? Like the amount of vacations you can take, whether you have to do certain things. Like if you have to go work at a job, especially now today, if you have to go work at a job, you have to get the vaccine. I mean, we're not there yet, but that's probably what will happen. You know what I mean? In many cases, you have to wear a mask. You have to do all these things, because if you don't, they'll just fire you. Right? So if you had money, you wouldn't have to do those things. You would have more freedom. But what happens is people, they don't have the education and the programming to just automatically do it. So because they don't know how to change, the only answer is, well, that stuff doesn't matter. While at the same time, you complain about how all these other things are happening, you don't have any freedom or whatever. But they think love is the answer, because that's such a convenient excuse. And if you also go ahead.
No, you can finish that.
If you also believe that you're going to magically be rewarded, then it's like, well, I was a loving person, so you can't say I was a bad person, just in case. Like you're trying to hedge all your bets. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. It's like the exact same thing as like, no, I'm an ally.
Right. And then they burn down your business, and you're like, did you hear about? I was watching this Paul Joseph Watson video. I think it was. where that Target, remember it was back, I don't remember which specific riot it was, but it was in one of these, where you have these people like running in, just looting and destroying this Target, right?
Yeah.
Well, apparently they hired a Somali American woman's company to come and redesign it and make it more people of color friendly or something. And they're putting like a big mural on the front of the Target. So it's like, it's just like they're hoping that they just won't get destroyed again.
That's so good.
Wow. It's ridiculous. Like what people will do to it's beyond virtue signaling. I mean, like what it actually comes out to be is virtue signaling. But like, why are they doing that? Because everyone knows that everyone knows it's stupid. Everyone knows it doesn't actually make sense, right? But why are they willing to participate in that? It's because like they see it as, well, then I won't be shamed, right? Like they don't want to face shame. They don't want to face like having to make a decision for themselves, or to stand out, or to like to even be clear within themselves, right?
Yeah, that takes work, man.
Dude, it does, right?
It
Like
takes so much work. You want to finish that point, or?
I was just like considering like how many people ask the question of like, oh, I'm trying to figure out who I am. Like I'm trying to discover who I am.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, damn, you don't know who you are. Like,
but you see how that's broken down to the most fundamental is that you don't even know if you're a boy or girl anymore, or who the fuck, or like what?
Yeah, but how can you know what your purpose is, or what to do in this world if you don't even know who you are?
Yeah.
You're
like imagine like a flathead screwdriver being like, fuck, am I a star bit? Am I a square bit? Oh man, I don't know what I'm used for. I'm like, am I a hammer? Like, what do I don't know.
Remember earlier we were talking about the sort of transhumanist philosophies, right? And all like these elite people think that we're going to download our consciousness into robots. And basically it's like, we need to evolve beyond this
limited
weak flesh, and like get into like the robots and all that, right?
Yeah.
What I see is like the transgenderism is a specific placement to get everybody into that path.
It's like the first step towards it.
Yeah, it's like, number one, the word trans is not a coincidence. Transhuman, and you say transgender, trans, this, all this stuff, right? And like, I'm a trans woman, I'm a trans man, you're already saying these things. But then also it's getting people to not identify with their body anymore, but identify with their consciousness, with how they feel and so forth. You see what I'm saying? You're making your identity, who you are, something that's not material.
No, that's a great point.
Imagine when they say, look, you're born into this man's body, but you're a woman. And then they present this like sleek looking, like
sexy,
hot, robo sexy doll thing, right?
She's black.
Like you can customize it however you want.
Yeah.
It's like an app. You could just change it, right?
Yeah.
People are like, oh, I want to be that.
No, that's a really, really good point because, well, I wanted to bring up this point that Cameron, you mentioned when we were talking earlier on that call. And it was a really, really, really important point, which is why we're making Self-Perfected and this podcast and all that stuff, where if we didn't have that group, if we didn't have this, it's like, what would we be thinking
now? Yeah.
What would we be doing? What would we be like questioning? We wouldn't question shit. We'd just be like, okay, like clearly I'm fucking insane for thinking that this is weird. Like I'll think it's weird, but I'll just keep that to myself and just do whatever. Like just keep.
What if your whole life was just like you liked football?
Right. Yeah.
And like that was it.
Well,
right? You just really liked football, but now you can't even go to a football game unless you wear a mask.
There's like the super.
And when you go to the football game and wear the mask, when they all do their kneeling and everyone stands up and puts their fist in the air, you're like, "Fuck, I have to do this part too." And like suddenly, the football, it doesn't even become about football anymore. It's like been transitioned into this other thing where you're like, fuck, can we just get back to like football and like the players and like it's like, so I'm saying, even if you have this bullshit purpose, you don't really get to decide that. You didn't decide it in the first place. You just went along with it. But it's being changed into something else. It's being used, like everything. It's like those lights, those buzzers, everything that people thought was their purpose is being used to just get you to go along with this new world that's being created, this new society.
And by light, you mean like when we were making the joke at the beginning of follow the light kind of thing?
Yeah, like something you're attracted to.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Because I had so many friends where it's like one of the first things that went out was, you know, you won't be able to play sports anymore. You won't be able to watch sports anymore. And for them, it was like,
they must be like depressed.
It was like, fuck, what do I do now? Right?
Yeah.
And it's like, wait, you're saying without those things, you're lost. Uh-oh. If that is the average state of the human being, and maybe it's not even sports, maybe it's just something else. It's like, I don't know. What else are people into?
Going to concerts?
Right, exactly. It's like, oh, fuck, I can't go to like the rave.
Going to the club.
Right, exactly. Go to the bars and all that stuff.
I think people still do that here, though.
True.
Do they wear masks or what?
I think so. Yeah, actually, yes. Like half of them do, half of them don't. I was watching some people's.
But that's in Florida. Like if you were in New York,
Florida.
that wouldn't be happening.
Yeah,
Imagine, you know, people are like macking on the dance floor, just making out. It's like
they just have the masks on, and they just
they're like putting on their gloves to like grab each other's booties and stuff.
They're not macking out, they're masking out.
Yeah, exactly. But you know what? It's like, Jake, you know, at the beginning when you were making that point of like, I feel like everybody already knows that like this is bullshit.
Yeah.
Wallahi, like if you poll the average person about what's going on, whether it be, just ask them if they believe in God. Just ask them if they believe in the universe. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But okay, Drake, before all this stuff, how deep did you go into spirituality?
I was pretty in there.
Okay. So imagine somebody suggested to you that love is something that like you have to go do, and like love is providing like basic needs for human beings. It's like we were so far into abstraction about what love was.
Yeah.
That for us to like, that became reality. So to come back to reality was like some other next level abstraction. Like, what the fuck do you mean love is to give? What does that mean?
Yeah.
You can't do that. That's not how it works. Love is a feeling, right?
It's funny because it's funny that you say it that way. Like being so far removed from reality, that becomes like basically what you identify with, right? It's the same way. Like, I was really into cartoons, just like more so into cartoons than reality.
Anime?
Like,
any anime?
Anime, loved it. Yeah.
You seem like an anime boy.
Yeah. Loved that. But like when it started out for me like really early on, and when I would watch TV, I would enjoy cartoons way more than seeing like the kid shows with the actual kids in them.
Right. Yeah.
Those seemed really contrived to me. But then the cartoons, it's like you could do anything, and there was like fanciful and all that, right? And
fanciful.
Yeah, just like it's full of fantasy, full of
okay, yeah, that makes sense. I thought it was like a character or something.
But to me, watching that stuff was more enjoyable, and it gave me my like energetic fix more, and I started to identify more with that kind of stuff than like actual actual like talking to people. And I also identified more with like the spiritual thing of like just like it's all about feelings, it's all about emotions, it's all about just like, you know, love is love. No, you just don't understand love. If you think you have to do something, you don't understand it. You're the dumb one here. You know, you don't get it. And I remember like even like early conversations with Cameron, it was very challenging because what he was saying made so much fucking sense, but it was against everything that I had, you know, chosen to believe.
Yeah.
You know, and he would come at me with like, not come at me, but like the way that he would explain things was just like, damn, that's so fucking practical. And I don't want to believe that, but it's just, that makes sense. Like, I'd be stupid to deny that. You know what I mean? And man, it's cool seeing myself now compared to then, because now I see the practicality in everything that Cameron was suggesting really early on to me about actually making a difference and getting up and doing something, and doing something being helping educate the world and get others to see this. And I didn't understand that then. And he was telling me back then to do that, right? And I'm like, yeah, that's not what I'm gonna do. I'm totally not gonna do that, because that has no it didn't seem like something I wanted to do, you know? And I had made a decision of like, I'm just gonna do whatever makes me happy, and that doesn't sound enjoyable at all to me. Like, it doesn't sound like I'm gonna get a lot of like good vibes that or good feelings.
But what made you happy? Did it ever actually give you fully that thing you were looking for?
You know what made me happy was like, there were moments when I would be with my friends and we would all do drugs.
Man, that's exactly where I wanted this to go, into drugs. Seriously.
But seriously, that's where I was. It was just like, I was miserable most of the time, and I wasn't even really like fully aware of it, because I thought I was being positive, and I was listening to like Your Wish Is Your Command and all of that, which is it's phenomenal listening to that training now compared to where I was with it, right?
How many people listen to it just to feel good?
Right.
Versus, oh, I should use this information and do something with it.
Yeah.
Like
they think that the feeling good is actually going to get them the thing. Like, just
they think that by listening to it, it's changing me. So
I don't have to actually change.
It's happening to me. Like,
Yeah.
it's not like I have to change something.
Right.
That's so true. Just listen to it over and over and over again, and it'll change your DNA in that.
Yeah.
Like, it'll support you to get to a point where you then realize, however long it takes you, that, oh, I have to change.
Right.
It's also, I know you're gonna say something on this, Asif, but like, I have family members who think of themselves as very spiritual, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the people that they hang out with are into like the medicine, which, if you don't know what that is, it's code for like ayahuasca and DMT and like all the like things that the tribes do. So it's not considered a drug. And I just had to tell her, I was like, look, hey, look, you're hanging out with a bunch of drug addicts. Why are you hanging out with a bunch of drug addicts? Because I can see it now. Whereas before, I honestly believed that was being spiritual. Damn, and I can see how other people feel that way and think that way.
That was where I started.
That's
like
where
what?
I was gonna say that's where Mitch started, and Mitch was all like apprehensive about
Mitch is like, well, I don't want to talk about. Don't everybody know.
Now that he's not here,
that's what happens. That's what happens when you can't be on the episode. Okay?
He doesn't say anything anyways.
But it's like I've when I was in college, I faced this point of, it's so fascinating because I'm looking now at when I was at the Air Force Academy. My whole goal was to go into the Air Force so that I could become a pilot, and then, man, my life would be set. Like, I'd be making a lot of money. It's a cool lifestyle, because I had an example of a family member who was doing that, right? Exactly.
Flying planes and shit.
Right. But for a lot of reasons, when I was there, there was so much emotional instability within me. And sort of like this feeling within myself of, I'm not really doing anything fulfilling from my perspective. It's like I'm just following this system to get this result, but this result is very superficial. Like, it's not ultimately anything that actually matters to me. And so when I left there, and then suddenly I'm in an environment where there's very little discipline, very little accountability required, because I went to a different university and I was just in my own apartment doing whatever I want all day. I don't even have to go to class. And I was studying a lot of, it's like when I was younger, maybe like middle school, I was always really fascinated by, I read a lot of science fiction. So I was really fascinated by sort of things that were like on the edge science wise. You could almost kind of think of like esoteric metaphysical, right? Like when I was in middle school, I was really fascinated by relativity theory. Right?
Okay.
I would always read these books about Albert Einstein, and they would like, like kind of like kids versions of explaining relativity theory. And I would try to read literally like the Einstein's relativity, and I'd write out the equations, and I was trying to understand. Of course, I didn't understand calculus, so how could I understand derivatives? So I wasn't actually able to understand, but it fascinated me,
Yeah.
But I remember when I was in college, so I'd already left the Air Force Academy. I was at this other university, and I was kind of like at a loss for what to do with my time. So I went back to Half Price Books. It's like this, I don't know if you guys have those in Florida. It might just be a Texas thing, but it's basically like a used bookstore where they have new and used books, right?
Okay.
Anyways, and they have like a math and science section. So I was getting all these books that were kind of like the stuff I used to read, science fiction, not science fiction, but like science on the edge, like multiple universe theory, string theory, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that kind of got me back onto the track of like, okay, I'm not just going to go along. I'm not just doing this. I want to actually kind of investigate and kind of explore things, right? And at a certain point, I started looking into like consciousness itself, because I started having these questions of like, why am I aware of myself? Things like that. And I've talked about this before, right?
Right.
But I remember this one question kept coming up within my mind, which seemed really significant, which was like, why is it that we're all, or for myself, why am I looking out from behind something? Like the way I experience reality is I'm inside this body, like looking out, like almost like there's like a blank screen behind me and I'm like just looking forward, right? Which is, I think, probably everyone's experience, right? And I'm like, everyone experiences reality that way. Isn't that weird? Like, it just seems so arbitrary. It seemed like such a weird, reality could be experienced in so many different ways theoretically. And I'm like, but it seemed to me that was significant. Like, in other words, it seemed to me that there was things about reality that we were taking for granted. And people were so focused on stuff that didn't seem to matter to me at the time, like making money, but not like making money from the perspective of how I see it now, but from the perspective of, well, I just got to live my life to survive. More from that perspective, And I was really just like, okay. I mean, like, think about it. Like, I was on a track. I went to the certain school, I went to the certain university, and then I very abruptly just like changed courses, like switched gears with no real plan. And so it was like, suddenly it's like being ripped out of like a movie, and you're like, wait, what am I doing here? I thought I was actually in this movie this whole time. So now I'm trying to figure out, what is my purpose? Like, what's the meaning of life? What's the point? But I was also very aware that all of the inner anxiety and turmoil that I felt inside of myself, which is why I left the Air Force Academy in the first place, was connected to the fact that everyone was focused on survival, that no one had any purpose, that I didn't have a real purpose, that there was like trauma in my life. And I also became aware at the time that it's like, I was doing this for a long time, but I didn't realize it until I remember it was like a certain day when I was at this other university, right? University of St. Thomas. I was sitting there and I was piecing together, okay, wait. So this happened, and then this happened in my life. And then I remember my mom left. Okay, and that created anxiety. And that's why that time my grandparents picked me up, I was all throwing a fit and my dad got mad at me. Okay. And then this happened. And then I went here, and then I left this place because I was a lot of anxiety. And it was just like when my mom left, and I was, okay, so that was because of that. Okay. And I was like piecing together this picture of my life as to all the events that were significant, how they were all connected. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And at a certain point, I was like, wait, I'm creating a story about my life. And like, I became aware in that moment that I was doing it. You see what I mean? Before, I had just been doing it automatically, like just trying to piece together and figure out why my life was the way it was. And I was trying to explain it to myself based on all the events that had occurred. But in that moment, I became aware that I was doing it. And I was like, wait a second. I'm like, creating this story that I keep coming back to and like constructing and building and trying to figure out. And I was like, why am I doing that? Like, why am I even aware of all of this stuff? So that's when I started looking into consciousness, right? I started looking at, okay, what is this thing that I'm doing, that I'm participating in? And then the only thing that was available at the time for me to really find, because I was into all that science stuff that I was telling you about, was the scientific perspective of things. So all the stuff I had learned up until that point, like quantum mechanics, which I wasn't like some expert at, I just like understood some of the concepts, right? All of that was being used to explain what consciousness was and where it comes from. But the scientists had no idea. They were like, we think at some level in the brain, there's like quantum mechanics comes into play, which creates consciousness. And they had all these like different explanations, right? And there was all this debate, right? But because I was looking into that, then I got exposed to people like Terence McKenna, because they're talking about consciousness. Yeah. They're talking about all of these kind of things that you naturally will get into, like the spiritual side of things, right?
Yeah.
But that led me into psychedelics.
Yeah.
And then I would be reading all this stuff about psychedelics, people describing their experience. And I was like, wow, this sounds really cool. Like, I want to experience this other reality. Like,
yeah,
because reality itself was so mundane.
Yeah.
And it was so, I was just always experiencing myself with so much anxiety. I was like, okay, it's like, I can imagine it's like what an explorer would feel like going on a voyage. You know what I mean? We're going to go into the unknown or something, right? So I actually had all this anxiety about doing psychedelics and everything. I was actually afraid because I'm like, well, what if, you know, it's like,
you heard about bad trips and things like that.
It wasn't really that so much. It was my own feeling of like, what if like I get lost or something?
Yeah. What
like,
if I get stuck?
Okay.
Yeah. Or something. It's like, what if I get lost within it? And like, I don't, you know, it's like a feeling of just getting lost basically, but not really understanding why, but just knowing that there was some potential for that. And it's funny because I became very obsessive. Like, I want to do psychedelics, like DMT. And my friends would tell me about all this stuff. And I think he was just lying. Like, I don't think he actually did it, but he told me this whole story about it. I was like, that's so fascinating, right? And it was funny. It was probably a good thing, but it was very hard for me to get my hands on anything because I wasn't very good at communicating with people. You know what I'm saying? Like I had a friend who, it's like I had to do everything through him because he was really good. He can make connections with anybody. He was like, just, I like really envied that part of him. Mm-hmm. He was so good at talking to people. He could talk to anybody, right?
Yeah.
But I couldn't do that. So it's like, I kind of had to do everything. And he kind of used that as like, oh yeah, we'll do that. But it would never like, you know what I mean? So it was weird because I could never just go like, okay, I'm just going to go do the MT this weekend. Like, that never was easy for me to do. Okay. But the reason I brought it up was because I understand totally that feeling of like wanting to escape. You don't think that you're escaping. You think that the thing you're doing is more real than this.
Yes.
And that could be video games. That could be going to concerts. It feels like you're more alive than when you're just going to work, doing all the bullshit that you don't want to do. But if you're honest with yourself, you still have to do all that stuff. Mm. There's very few people who are like Terence McKenna, who could just make it their whole life. Do you know what I mean? But then at the end of the day, if you really study him, you're like, but he didn't really do anything.
Yeah.
He was just like everybody else, still doing mundane shit. And I only see the rock star aspect of what I see. I don't see the mundane reality he had to live too. So it's like when you think it'd be amazing to be a rock star, but you don't really just consider their day to day. It's like being Brad Pitt sounds amazing, but only because you're idolizing him in your mind. What's it actually like to be him?
Yeah.
I mean, it might be better because he's got money and stuff, but it's not, but even that person still has to face reality in terms of everything that we're doing, you know, just on a daily basis and everything, you know?
Yeah.
But it's like, I really get that impulse to want to escape.
I remember for a time, it's like, all I wanted to do was dream, like literally physically. I wanted to be sleeping and dreaming. And I would wake up and be like, like, can I please just go back to sleep? Please. And then it'd become like 1 o'clock and I'd just be like, fuck, okay, I'll just go eat and stuff and play video games and stuff like that. And then just try to figure out what to try to dream about when I go back to sleep. And that was like what I thought was like it. I was like, this is way fucking better.
I went through that too. What happened was when I was in this period I was telling you about where I was like doing all the LSD and all this stuff, I had a girlfriend at the time. And I was kind of trying to get her to just drop out of society.
Yeah.
And go like figure out. You see?
Come with
Because
you,
it's
right?
like a man needs the woman. Do you see what I mean? Like I'm gonna go just full force, like be a fucking scientist in a lab. I just need someone else to kind of like help me survive, and you know what I mean? Like manage everything. You know what I mean? You don't think of it like that, but that's what it is.
That's true.
It's like you need the sidekick. You need the person who's gonna support you. You know? And she didn't want to do that. She wanted to stay within, you know, going to college, doing the path, get into the degree, all that stuff, right? And we broke up because of that, because I was really pushing the point of just fuck all that stuff. Like, let's just go explore. I was like, let's go figure out what life really is. That's what I said.
Yeah.
No, I said reality. Like, let's go figure out what reality really is, right? So I explained that because when we broke up, it like became this, my entire life just collapsed. It's like I became super depressed, like just crying every day, all day. Like, because I didn't have that person anymore. Even though when I was with her, I like treated her like shit. Like, it wasn't like it was so magical and everything before. It was just, it had become a point where I had built up so much. And it's interesting, if you go listen to that audio, remember we were listening to the other day from Bernard, where it was about, we played it on one of the meetings. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Where he was talking about, well, he said recreation.
The human is the system. The 2-minute one?
No.
The longer one.
The one about remember I was talking about Kian's car accident and all that stuff.
Yeah.
What was that audio? I can't remember. If you guys remember.
I don't remember the name of it. No, not at all.
But he explains how if you're not willing to stand up, you'll go through points where the thing that you care about the most, that you think is what you need, that you can't live without, will be taken from you.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of gave it in the example of it was like a biblical allegory. The plagues.
Yeah.
The plagues in Egypt, remember when Moses and all that stuff, right?
Exactly.
And it was kind of like these things are going to visit you because you're not fucking standing up, right? Things are going to be taken. And I was looking at these points for myself of like how I went through these periods where these things were like constantly taken away, right? Like when I was 7 years old, my mom left, you know? And you might say, well, how was a 7-year-old going to stand up in this world? But it was still a point where I was identifying myself as everything in my life is just taken care of. And it's just this, I depend everything on this person.
Wow.
And then when my mom left, it was like, well, now I can't be stable. I'm just always going to be anxious and I can never do anything on my own. So when I would go into any situation, like when I went to the Air Force Academy, before I went to the Air Force Academy, I went to a different military school. And it's like a long story why I did that, but it was part of the process of being able to go to the Air Force Academy, is I had to spend a year at this other place. And when I went there, it's like you have to do like military fucking style boot camp, basically, right? So it's like a very stressful thing, right? And if you're stable within yourself, it's like fucking stressful and annoying, but you're like, oh, it's hard, but I'm going to get through it and I'm tough and I'm going to come out. But for me, it was like, this is too hard. Like, I want to go home. Like, I need my mom, basically. You see what I mean? And I would cry and I would beg them to let me go home. But always something would happen where I would get the resolve to just keep going. You see what I mean? And it would usually be some further acceptance of, like, I would always end up usually in those moments like praying to God. Even though I prided myself on I don't believe in God. But it was in those extreme moments of like emotional pain where I'd be like, okay, look, if God exists, then you will make this go away from me. And I would say, like, I don't care how it happens. Like, if I'm okay with this, I'll stay here. If I'm not, like, make it go away. And I only did that maybe 3 or 4 times at most in my life, but always immediately afterwards, the situation would change, right?
It's funny with that story is like a religious person will use that to justify, well, look, God took care of you. You just got to put your faith in God and see.
But I knew it was myself. I knew it wasn't anything else. Like, I knew that. I knew that it was just like a way of psychologically, like, I don't know how to make myself accept this. So I'm going to, for a moment, lie to myself.
I'm going to create something and then let that.
Something else that has this power.
Yeah.
So then when it really, and I'm not saying that's obviously not the best way to do it, but what becomes really fucked up is that thing that you created to comfort yourself when you start pretending like it'll solve all the other problems in the world too. You see what I mean? And that's like where people, it's like, well, if I'm honest with myself that it's not real, some other bad shit's going to happen and I won't be able to use it again. You know what I mean? But I was so fucked up, I would just use it whenever I needed to. Right. But at a certain point though, it was like when I left the academy, I was like, I wasn't like just a choice I made. I just didn't do that. Even though things got to a point when I was there where it was like untenable.
It wasn't like a choice you made. You just didn't do it.
It wasn't like a choice I made. Just like I just didn't do it. I didn't use that excuse. Like, oh God, please make the situation go away.
Okay.
I just made a decision. I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah. Okay.
And then from then on, I didn't use that anymore as like the security blanket. But what happened was things got worse inside of me. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. To the point where when I was in university, it's like I had an apartment at the time. My grandfather was paying for it as far as I know. And then I would have like some basic bills like internet and stuff like that. And I was also interning for this attorney, making like 10 or 15 bucks an hour. And I was also doing some tutoring at the time, right? So I would have barely enough money just to like buy drugs and alcohol and shitty food and pay some of my bills. So anytime, like if I wouldn't have enough money for a bill, or like if there'd be a test I didn't study for, that one I remember very specifically. I had a probability test. It was like my final exam.
Oh shit. Here we go.
And I didn't study at all ever in that class. And I remember opening up the book. And if you ever studied probability, you open it up and it's like all these summation symbols and integrals and shit. And you're just like,
it's like a new language. Yeah.
You're like, what the fuck is this? Right. I'm like, okay, no, just focus. Okay. Let me take one
problem. This is you studying you before, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. A long time ago, like 2005. And I'm like trying to understand it. And I'm like, and just like the anxiety is growing and building. And I'm like, I have to go take this test. And I'm like, who cares? What does it matter? Who cares if I fail it? But then it started to matter again. And I was just like going through these waves and cycles.
I remember that.
Total fucking extreme anxiety. You know, I mean, everyone maybe at some level can experience
just that specific point of like, you're like, oh, this doesn't fucking matter. Like, whatever. It's not a big deal. But then it would just creep back up. And then you just be playing that game inside.
It's like, you're suppressing that it kind of does matter in some way, right? Yeah. Well, I just remember that being so fucking, and there would be other times where I remember one time I was leaving class and I was going to go drive back to my apartment or something. And I just had this feeling inside of me of like dread, just like, I don't know how I can even describe it. It's hard to relate to it now, but it's like this dread, like this feeling of like something very bad is going to happen or is happening, or it's just like a feeling. It's like just a really intense negative feeling. And I think people will call that like an anxiety attack or a panic attack or something. Right? But it wasn't like I was like, it wasn't like that, but it was kind of intense like that. Like the feeling was like really bad. And I remember calling my mom and just telling her about it. Right. And she didn't know what to do. And I was trying to explain to her, and she was trying to reason with me. And she was like, oh, just go see a psychiatrist. Right. That was it. That was the only answer. And I go see the psychiatrist. He talks to me for 10 minutes and I start trying to tell him my whole life story and everything. And he's like, oh, well, I mean, you're bipolar. I'm like, okay. So he's like, take these medications. Didn't take the medications. It was like some kind of anti-anxiety or something, right? Well, someone's texting me. Okay. So I'm sharing some of this because it's like, I know what it's like to be on the extreme negative side of things. So you guys know me, but a lot of people maybe don't. And they might look at things and be like, oh, well, your life's going really nice or something like that. And it's like, first of all, it's still hard. It's still difficult because I'm not putting my security into something else. My security is tied to making a difference in this world, which necessarily implies that I'm going to have to keep going through layers and layers and layers of challenging my programming to be able to do more than I can currently do. Like if a politician can do it, then I have to be able to do it. I have to be able to stand, I mean, potentially on TV in front of millions of people and say something and be like cool with it, and then get up, and then right after that, go do a meeting with somebody. You know what I mean? Like that stuff can't phase you. Like think about Trump. That stuff doesn't phase him. You can tell it doesn't. He'll go from one thing to the next thing to the next thing, and he's just doing what he's doing. We have to be able to do that kind of stuff. So it's not like I make a decision and then suddenly everything's just great and perfect. But the reason why things tend to work out is because I have to increase my abilities to take responsibility. And because of that, then I can actually take on more responsibility. And when you take on more responsibility in the system, you make more money, things become more stable, you get more things, you get more responsibility, you get more influence and so forth. Right. But the starting point is not just to accumulate those things, because if that were the starting point, I never would have done it.
Mm-hmm.
My path in life was to be basically a failed artist. Like, and when I say failed artist, I mean like never even produced anything that anyone gave a shit about.
Right.
Not because it was just so great, people didn't get it. Like, it just wasn't good. Like, I never would have taken it. I remember when I wanted to be a musician and I was like recording music and all this stuff. And I was terrified to even go to like some music venue and talk to them about playing. I wouldn't even know what to do. I'm just like, well, I could just I'll go up there and talk to them. And I'd be like, oh no, because I would just go into all this anxiety. Like, like a salesperson when you're learning and you're like, well, if I go and pitch this person, like all that same shit, that's how I felt back then.
Yeah.
It worked towards all that. So I had to walk all through that when I started doing sales as well. Like I had to actually face all that shit. The reason why I wasn't successful at anything else that made me feel good, I had to face all that in the context of what we're doing here with TechnoTutor. But the only reason I'm doing this is because it matters. Wow. I couldn't make myself do it when it didn't matter.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Asif?
I was just making that point of that's the why.
But you see that? Like, that is why I kept doing everything. Because when it didn't matter, when it was just about my feelings, it's much easier to just, the reason why, because you had mentioned that point about sleeping and so forth, right? And I was like, I went through that. So when I broke up with my girlfriend, I went into this total tailspin for months. I mean, imagine like not even bathing for weeks, just sitting around watching cartoons and shit, and like smoking pot, drinking every day, and like just feeling bad and trying to suppress it all. Like, imagine, okay, here's a scenario. Sitting for 1 week on a couch, barely getting up except for to have to get drugs or drink alcohol, and just watching, what's that show called? Scrubs. The whole time, not thinking it's funny. And within myself, feeling like I'm literally in hell and I'm going to go to hell. And I'm just sitting here because if I could just for a moment try to focus on something that's not feeling bad, then it'll just go away for a moment.
Yeah.
But literally, it's just like I'm in hell.
Jesus.
That's how I would feel. And then I would then try to like shift gears and go somewhere else and do the same thing over and over again. And just going through cycles of that until eventually I moved out to Portland where my mom lived, because she moved out there. And my mom is totally fucking unstable emotionally. So I can see directly where all this came from within me, right? Like my mom used to, when I was living with her in Portland, she would get mad at me because she would go to work all day. And she was like a personal assistant of some executive at a company there in Portland, I think. And she would go to work all day. She'd come home. She'd be resentful of me because I wasn't paying any rent or anything. I was trying to do like a little tutoring, but I was so depressed all the time. And I would just try to like make music, and it wasn't going to go anywhere. And she would be really resentful. And she'd be like telling me to go get a job or leave or something. And I would just want to go drink. I would just wait until the end of the day, get some alcohol and drink to feel better. And she was getting pissed at me. We would argue about stuff or whatever. And she would lock herself in the bathroom and threaten to kill herself.
Damn.
To like manipulate me to go fucking, I don't know, go get a job or something. Right? So we'd be like screaming at each other. And the house we lived in was like this mansion that somebody had divided up the mansion into like different apartments, I guess you could say. But it's like, imagine you're living in like several rooms of an actual mansion. It's like there on, in like Northwest Portland. It's like this really obvious building right next to the Urban Outfitters. And it was paper thin walls though. You could hear everything. So most people didn't make any noise. I'm just imagining going like, man, those people could hear us screaming at each other like every day.
Jeez.
You know, like I know they could. But anyways, I remember at one period when I was living there, I would just go in, I would stay up really late. And then I would sleep in until like 1 or 2. My mom would always try to get me to get up because it's like, you can't just stay in bed all day. Right. And I would wake up at like 1 p.m. or whatever, 2, whatever, feel like shit. Because you know how you feel when you sleep in like way too long, you just feel like total shit. And that just compounds every day because you want to go to bed because you just don't feel good. But then if you don't get up, you're going to feel bad again, that whole cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I started studying lucid dreaming.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And part of it is it's a lot easier to do if you wake up, you stay up for a little bit, and you go back to bed. When you go back to bed, it's like you're almost like you're taking a nap, but it's only like an hour or two after you've been asleep or been awake. It's a lot easier to do.
Yeah.
And you just have to like train yourself. It's really not fucking hard to do. And I really wanted to do it because it was like, again, it was like the drugs. It was like an escape.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember doing it and I would get really good at it. But even within that, I wasn't successful. It's like nothing I would do would be like, I couldn't take it to the next level. It's like I could kind of do it, but then it wouldn't be enough. Like, it's like I could lucid dream. I could easily get into that state, but then I would lose control. I would like lose control of it. And then it would just end up like, I was like, oh, I'm in my dream. Okay, cool. I'm lucid dreaming. All right. And then suddenly it'd be like, I'd get lost in like whatever the thing I was trying to do. And then suddenly it just turned into a normal dream. And I'd wake up and I'd be like, drats, It just became like this. And then I would wake up, I'd feel depressed. I would go lay on the couch and I would play FIFA for like a few hours until I couldn't stand anymore. I'd try to watch some cartoons and then I would just end up going back to sleep again. Wow. For like months. And kind of what supported me to move out of that was there's this bookstore in Portland called Powell's. It's like this amazing fucking, like, imagine like 3 Barnes and Nobles stacked together, and it's all just like a whole Barnes and Nobles would be like one department. That'd be like the metaphysics section or something, right?
Wow.
And so there'd be all kinds of shit in there. Like those Neothink books I have there, those would be all like on the shelves. They'd have like everything you could think of. Yeah, seriously, everything.
Really?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I got some of those. I don't think those ones I got from there, but at that time I had bought a bunch of those from there and then got rid of them and then got more. But my point is, I spent a lot of time there, like in the coffee shop, like just reading stuff, and I'd buy stuff and I'd go back and sell it because it's like a used bookstore, and I'd buy more books and shit like that. And I was just like doing, like, I would get onto some track of like, okay, I'm studying Buddhism, and I'd read all the books and everything, and I'd be trying to do the meditation or whatever. And then I'd be like, something else would catch my eye, be more interesting. And I would start doing that. I'd get all obsessed with that. Right. And it was that kind of thing that kind of eventually pulled me out of that, just wanting to just basically to be depressed and escape through doing nothing. See, but think about it. I have a relatively high vocabulary coming into it. Mm-hmm. So for somebody else who doesn't even have that vocabulary, they'd just be stuck. Like they would, because I could read like a book like this in a day and be like, okay, cool. What's the next thing or whatever? I could see if it was bullshit. Mostly what I found out through that was nobody had a clue what they were talking about. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite authors is a guy named Robert Anton Wilson, and he has some really cool books, which I wouldn't recommend them now. I'm just saying in the context of where I was at, they were really cool. But he talks about like programming your consciousness, and not like in a salesy kind of way, but more talking about like how does programming work and so forth. And even someone like that, it's like I would read enough where I'd be like, this person's still kind of trying to figure it out. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like they didn't really have the answer. Like they were still kind of trying to figure out. So they were just writing everything and it seemed really great, but I'm like, they don't really know. It's not the answer. So I would very easily just like discard people. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, okay, that theory, interesting. I would integrate some of it, but it's like, that's not the answer. Mm-hmm. But it was all of that eventually, because I started getting into like, and see, up until this point, I hadn't even touched spirituality yet.
Oh, fuck, man. Okay, so wait. When you say spirituality, what do you mean? Because
meaning I was still coming from like the psychedelics and all that stuff. Right. Like Timothy Leary. So Robert Anton Wilson was kind of a part of that thing. Philip K. Dick, more that kind of side of things where it was more like psychological rather than spiritual.
Right.
And, but it was still kind of touching on programming, subconscious, consciousness, all that kind of stuff, but still coming from more like a scientific perspective. And I didn't really even start approaching the spiritual side until I found this book, and I can't remember what it was called. It was like something like Rainbow something or other. And it was I think it was called Rainbow Evolution. And it was like this book, like this fucking thick. And it was like, every single thing you can talk about, chakras, lucid dream, fucking astral travel, like everything was in this book. Everything. It was like the manual.
Wow.
And once I got into that, it was like I couldn't quite understand it, because I'm like, they're talking about chakras and they're talking about evolution, but I didn't have all that context. So it was just like kind of didn't make sense completely. It just seemed like this kind of very artificial thing. But I was also into Krishnamurti. And then I found this book called The Lightning Path. Actually, I don't think that was the name of the book, but that was what it was, the path was called. And I can't remember the guy's name. I feel like his name was like Michael Shield or something, but that could be wrong. But he wrote this book. And in the book, right, maybe. In the book, though, he said he was talking about the Anunnaki. Okay. And I hadn't heard of this before, right? And he was talking about how he was kind of giving like a history of humans and stuff like that. And he was saying how we were created by this race called the Anunnaki. And they created this as like a slave race, and they programmed us with emotions so that we could be controlled. Okay. That was like the basic point of what he was saying. Right. And then he gave this process to kind of help free yourself from that control through like breathing.
Wait, is this related to the lightning path?
Yeah, that's what it was called. Okay. So he was talking about breathing and like using 4 count. I think it was 4 count breath, but he was talking about some different things. And he described this experience where he got all this information by meditating and got like this like download that came through his crown chakra and all this. And David Icke says the same thing. A lot of people say this, right? And so I was kind of like just integrating all this. And then he was talking about channeling. And I was also looking into Seth. You guys ever heard of Seth?
Yeah.
Right. And then
Seth Meyers, right?
Seth Meyers. I was starting to channel Seth Meyers, right? But no, Seth, and then
Seth is a being that somebody channels.
It's a channel, yeah. Jane person, right? Roberts or something like that. Yeah. And apparently, like Seth was like really popular with like maybe Oprah, maybe or something. I'm not sure. Maybe I don't know if that's right. Maybe not. I think
it's Seth.
Somebody popularized it. I can't remember. But in any case, so I started looking into the channeling stuff. And there was a few other channels like I was watching on YouTube. I remember there was like this really old couple, and it was a guy. He was like the main one, you know. So it's like, you know how Abraham Hicks, right? But it's like the woman who's the channel. This was like the guy was the channel. The old man was the channel. And he would just start talking, and he was like representing some consortium of beings. I forget what they were called, like the collective or some shit, right? And he would talk. And none of the shit he would say would have any fucking difference, but it was really cool. Like I was always more interested, like, oh, that's cool. I want to be able to do that. I didn't really care what they were saying.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I literally didn't give a fuck what they were talking about. It was just like, it's like I wanted to be the rock star. I wanted to be the special person. That's what I was really attracted to.
Psychic or whatever it was.
Right. Like I want to be the one. That was the thing. And I remember during that time when I was living there, I was into all kinds of shit, man. And I remember reading the Varieties of Religious Experience by William James, right? He was like an 18th century psychologist or 19th century. And he wrote this book, and in it, he was talking about these people and all the stuff they would do to try to become a saint, right? Like fucking torture themselves and stuff, right? And like just all kinds of stuff. And he was talking about like the varieties of religious experience, like things that people would do to try to get closer to God. And I remember when I had read that was before I even moved out to Portland. And that was one of those times where like, I would literally just all day I'd wake up, I'd just read that book and I'd be depressed and then I'd go back to sleep. And I'd wake up and I'd read, that's all I did. But I was like, oh, okay, I get it. And I was trying to explain to my mom, I can't go get a job because my purpose is to become a saint. Right. So can you imagine like being her and being like,
fuck.
But in my head, I'm like this. I mean, I was like, there's no other purpose that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like nothing else anyone else is doing is making any sense. What's the point? Like, I'm not going to be happy in any of that. And the only thing I could find that would sort of give me a little spark of like something better was this kind of stuff. Right. But I remember fast forward when I was in Portland, I remember one of my friends from university, he had called me and he was like kind of catching up and everything. And I was trying to convince him that what I was doing was becoming the next incarnation of Christ. Right. That was what I was trying to do. Like, not like I was trying to be the one Jesus that leads everybody. It was just like this evolution of your consciousness where you would become Christ consciousness. Right. And I was trying to explain. And I mean, I can imagine now, like him being like, oh, fuck, man. Like, like, oh shit, you went off the deep end. But it was like, I would I would read about it, I would research it, I would try to integrate it, and then I would be like, okay, what's next? Let me find something else. Like, let me get to the next thing. It was just trying to find something that would like give you that feeling of like being alive. So
what's funny is like a lot of what you're saying I relate to. Like I remember having these feelings of like I want to be like like I am the next Jesus, you know, like and actually believing that. But only I was believing this as like a child, and not to not to say like, oh, you're doing this as an adult, but like,
dude, I've been doing it since I was like 5.
I was doing this since I was 5. But no, I was impulsed with that very early on, you know, like this the religious impulsing that I got was like, you're special.
Oh,
you know,
I just realized.
What?
Okay, you know how everyone's like, Jesus was the perfect human being, right?
Yeah.
And whenever you're like, well, that's why we should become perfect. We should be like him. Why don't you become like him? And they're like, well, no one can ever be perfect like Jesus, right? You know, you always hear this bullshit, right?
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense why they would say that. Because Jesus was like the one who created the religion, who like set everything up so like everybody could fucking benefit, like the, you know, like the priests and the pastors. So it's like they have a way of making money. They don't want you to become Jesus because then they have no purpose. You see what I'm trying to say? It's like, well, if everybody had the point of becoming Jesus, then it's like, oh, then you could become like fucking special and you could lead people and you could do all this stuff. But it's like it creates it where you can only ever just be a follower and subservient to the whole point.
You have to be at the employee level of things, kind of. It's like you
See,
can't.
I didn't like
you can't
that.
be the owner. Yeah.
That's how I felt about being a human being in this society. Is like you're just a follower. I wanted to be the one who was like special.
Yeah.
And what's funny is, if you kind of fast forward to more like now, it's like when you start to give up those points of actually caring about that, and then you realize, holy fuck, I actually have to become a leader. So then what you do is you stop caring about the recognition. You stop caring about being special. You stop caring about getting credit, and you start focusing on who would I actually have to become to be able to do that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And if I tried to go the route of just being a Jesus person who was special because of just some special qualities, I would never become that. So if you look at it for yourself, how are you actually going to make an impact in this world? If you just go, well, I don't want to try to be like one of these people who just thinks they're special and tries to be like Jesus and creates a following. I'm going to get rid of all that. I'm just going to be like a normal average person. That's just a polarity. But if you just remove the parts of yourself that cares about being special, that cares about getting recognition and adulation and followers, if you get rid of that, then you realize, okay, but what was important about what Jesus did? What is it that's important that Donald Trump or Bill Gates or George Soros or any of these people are like? What are they able to do? What's the level of influence that they can have?
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? And so as I started to remove those points within myself of like, I had to go through a period where it's like, well, you shouldn't be special. And I see people fall into that trap for a long time where they're like, well, you don't need to be special. You don't need to become wealthy. You don't need to do any of that stuff because they're just trying to suppress all of the negative programming that we're programmed with. Do you see what I mean? Like the ego stuff.
Yeah.
It's like when people say Kanye West has a big ego.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, but at least he's doing something.
Right.
And the stuff that you're thinking he has a big ego about, you're just jealous.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So I'm not in any way saying you shouldn't be like Jesus. You shouldn't stand up and be a leader. You should do that. But just forgive yourself for the points where it's like you're doing it out of a need of something that you have like a lack.
Yeah.
Because everything in my life was being driven by that point of feeling this lack because my mom abandoned me when I was a kid. You see what I mean? But what shifted everything for me was when, through all this investigation and research and everything I did, when I came across this video by Destiny. And I don't remember what it was specifically. It was probably something to do with Anunnaki, because that's kind of what I was, like I told you, I was looking at this stuff, right? Oh, the other thing that was interesting about that lightning path stuff I was telling you about is in the book, the guy said, look, this experience, this information that I'm giving you is from this particular year. Okay, which was like the current year that I was in, or it was like 3 years ago or something. It wasn't very old. He was like, however, if something comes after, that makes more sense. He was like, reject what I'm saying and go with that.
Wow.
Oh.
Which, have you ever heard anyone say that?
No, that's
Oh.
amazing. Wow.
But
That's
it stuck
interesting.
with me. It really stuck with me because I'm
Huh.
like, it was like, I thought I had found the thing. It was like, whoa, because there was some practicality to it. It seemed really cool. And then it was right after that I saw a Destiny video.
That's really cool and really interesting. And it gives me more context because I had never heard of any of that stuff before I started watching the Destiny videos, like about Anunnaki and everything. So like, so it's cool that you went into it, you had some context to it to begin with. Right?
Yeah.
And so
well, that's the thing is I had a lot of context. So when I started watching Destiny videos, it was like they were just putting all the stuff that I had read, which you could easily get lost in any of these things. Astral travel, lucid dreaming, ayahuasca, fucking
Psychedelics.
ascension, meditation, channeling, like any of these things you can get lost in. You know, researching the Anunnaki and like the ancient tablets, and they were, you know, they created us, and but you know, like just David Icke, everything, right? It just put all those things into context. So all the stuff that was there, I'm like, okay, it allowed me to realize, at least in that moment, okay, there is no answer in anything that you're going to find. There's no path of information you can follow that is going to give you an answer that's going to give you a fulfillment. People create, and think about it, the people like David Icke or anybody who like create a following around some particular sort of set of knowledge, at the end of the day, they're monetizing it.
yeah.
I'm not judging them. I'm not criticizing him for that. I'm just saying, if you don't do that, what are you going to do? You're going to have to go get a job, right?
Yeah, of course.
So that was what kind of attracts people to those things. It's like, well, I could do that.
Mm.
You see what I mean? Like I could be like Abraham Hicks or whatever the fucking person's name is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I could be like that. But the thing is, all of those people are in those positions because it's like there's a certain few slots required in this consciousness that we have. And it's like if you're not in it,
it's like
you're just a faker. Yeah, you're a faker. You're pretending.
But you know, like in terms of the society, you have the kings, and then you have the people who are
The lords.
Yeah, like the court,
and
right? And it's like, look, we already got a Duke of Wales or some shit. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
Sorry, you know, it's like you can obsess, and then you have people who have like the Duke of Wales posters, and like everything is about fantasizing about that person. You're like, but you're not doing anything.
Yeah.
So it was just really obvious to me, like nothing. I'm not saying from like a belief perspective. It was just obvious to me. It became clear, like, okay, I see the context of all these things. Everything that you're looking at is something that was placed there to distract you, to get you obsessed and focused on it, so you won't challenge the system itself, the fundamental nature of the system and the fundamental nature of who you are. Because what's attracting you to it is this subconscious desire to be like that person, to have that following they have, to have that status, even if you know you'll never have it. It's like, that's why I see people on Facebook who are not billionaires talking about, well, it's the billion, you know, they'll like argue for why billionaires are so important and they're not billionaires. And I'm like, why are you arguing for that? You're not even considering reality. But then it's because it's like this deep down hope that someday you'll be able to have it. If I say it's okay for everybody else, at some point I'll be able to maybe have it, or it's not even a conscious thing perhaps, right? It's just like a subconscious thing. So to me, it just became very clear, like, there is no answer out there. The answer is I have to take responsibility for what's going on in here. Okay. It's going to take time, but it's like, we were at this lodge over the weekend, right? Because we were out in East Texas, and I was going to check into the hotel that we were going to stay at, like this lodge. And there was this couple there. And the woman, it was like a younger couple. I'd probably say like they were like mid-20s or something.
Okay.
And the woman was just like this, you know, like kind of like pouting.
Yeah.
And the guy kept coming up to her, like trying to like give her kisses and stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, I could just see in that moment the whole dynamic. It was like she was pouting and trying to get attention from the guy, and he was trying to appease her, and they were probably fighting about something.
Yeah.
I didn't know what it was like. I could just see it because I've seen that pattern in my own life.
Right.
I've seen it in my parents. Like I've seen it a million times.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like the only thing that matters is your feelings. And you're just trying to manipulate reality to make you feel good.
Yeah.
And that's what I was doing that whole time up until this point, without questioning it. I started this whole point back when I was in college saying, why am I not happy? And I was like, I'm going to figure out the answer to that. And then it led me to the point of realizing, okay, there's nothing in this world that in any way is set up for me to be happy. That's not the way it's designed. But yet everybody's trying to be happy. But name one person who's truly happy. And it's like we talked about before, if you can claim to be happy while people are suffering, how can you tell? Like, I'm not even saying you're a liar. I'm just saying, how can you be happy? How can you possibly be your ultimate happy? Like, if you say you're totally happy, and then I say, well, if nobody was suffering, wouldn't you be happier? How could you say no? Logically. It's like, well, yeah, that would make me happier. Otherwise, what are you saying? Like, what is your happiness based on?
Yeah.
Just based on some feelings or something.
Yeah.
And it's like, I realized also within this point of like, if I just try to play the game of just trying to be happy, I will never win that game. There are some people you could say by contrast are winning that game. You see what I'm saying? Like there's very few people in this world that their lives are so amazing. Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying they don't have any suffering in their life or anything, but comparatively, contrast wise, they're totally at a whole nother level of just freedom and enjoyment and stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And there's probably a lot of other negative things too. So I'm not saying they're at the ultimate of what's possible, but why should that be allowed at the expense of everybody else? And when you consider they're only able to have that lifestyle at the expense of everybody else. Somebody might look at that and go, oh, so you're saying communists, you just want to have communism. Yeah. You just want to take all their money and give it to everybody else. I'm like, well, how would that solve the problem?
Well, I've got like, cause that just put like an image in my mind of like, when you say like at the expense of everyone else, like I'm thinking of like a little kid having a birthday party, right? And they get to be super happy. And let's say, for instance, in this image, this is how it goes for what I'm seeing, is everyone else basically has to just cater to that kid.
Right.
And no one else gets a birthday party. It's just that kid. Like, so tomorrow that kid gets another birthday party. And the next day that kid gets another birthday party. And everything is just centered around that kid being happy. But everyone else literally has to participate in it and be like, they got to put on the smile and shit, but they're miserable in order to make that kid happy. Right. That's what I see what you're saying as far as like at the expense of everyone else. Why should that be allowed? Because what most people think, I think most people think that their happiness is not tied to anything that's going on in reality. You know, like their feelings and emotions is just like an individual thing. And so how I feel it shouldn't matter what's going on in your life about how I feel.
I think that's the biggest problem that we have to solve.
Yeah.
Is getting people to realize that your happiness is a function of your environment, the world, everything else.
Yeah.
We want to believe that like you said, we're just in control of our own happiness.
Yeah.
But it's like, that's not how food works. That's not how breathing works. That's not how water works. That's not how, like, think about a tree. Is a tree just happy? And what if you don't give it water? Can the tree just be happy anyways? Like, what is happiness?
Yeah.
And then the people who say like, well, I don't need money to be happy. It's like, then literally don't use money. Literally just stop using any money or anything that comes from money. Because it's like, okay, if I'm eating this box of cereal, let's say somebody gave it to whatever it is, Bunny Grahams. Somebody gave it to me for free, let's say. See, I didn't need money. Things just come to me. It's like, but why does this exist?
Yeah.
This only exists because this company wants to make money. And I'm pretty sure General Mills fucking owns this company. They don't say it on the box, probably on purpose.
Yeah.
But I remember this is one of those companies where
the
it's like,
contact us, and then they'll say like, usually the
yeah, if you look it up, it's like brands that you love that are actually owned by like these major corporations. It's like,
Yeah.
so they
Like
get all
Procter &
popular
Gamble.
and everyone's like, oh, I got my special thing. And then these companies just buy them up.
Yeah.
And then you complain whenever, hey, how come this not have the right ingredients anymore? What's this bullshit? Oh, and it's like everything is about money.
Yeah.
So usually what happens is somebody gets to a certain level of comfort, which compared to somebody like in some third world country, they are like a king.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Even though they might feel like compared to like Bill Gates, they're nothing. But compared to having to like literally survive all day long, you're a king. And you're like, no, it's all just about love. It's like, do you have the space to feel that way? And if you're being honest, you're not feeling love all the time.
No.
Like, it's just like you said earlier, like those moments where you feel really good. Here's how people feel love is like they have a memory and they reflect on it and they feel good from it.
Yeah. But you know what's interesting is like pain is the same thing, right? Like there are moments when you feel pain and then at least I was doing this. I recognized that I was doing this where I would feel pain and then I would reflect on that pain over and over and over again and just like use it as an excuse to not do things, to not challenge myself.
That's what I was doing when I broke up with that girl.
Yeah.
In college. Like I just
like
kept
ruined.
going through it of like,
Yeah.
And just
like I can't believe that
turning it over and over. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like in the moment, yeah, it's painful. It hurts, but that shit happens. Right. But then it's like, we then perpetuate that. And I guess we do that. It's the polarities, right? We do that with the happiness. We do that with the pain as well. Instead of just being able to just be here. And I know the spiritual people are going to take this like, yeah, just be here, be present. Yeah. Yeah. But like for them, what does that mean? Like to just be present?
Meditate.
For them, it's like really just abdicating or ignoring the feelings or ignoring like what they're
like
doing to themselves as opposed to facing it and actually transcending that point, not allowing it anymore. There's a subtle difference there, you know?
If you consider like what I've come to understand before I went out here, be here now, present.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, just like, you're just like, be at peace and just relax and just enjoy life. Rather than when we say be here, it's like, okay, let's look at here, take a snapshot of everything that's going on in the world and consider that into your actions, like what you should be doing on a daily basis.
Because be here, when people say it spiritual wise, they actually mean ignore reality.
They mean be right, just right here.
Yeah.
Just be in your own mind, convince yourself everything is okay. And I'm not being facetious. Like I'm not trying to make it a caricature. I'm just saying that's literally what they're saying. Because if you were actually here, you would see how plants and animals and people are suffering all the time right now in reality.
Yeah.
And then to think that you could be in your own little bubble and not worry about it, but then also you're going to die. So you are subject to the physical reality and the rules of physical reality.
Yeah.
Like if you really are just a spiritual being having a physical experience, just leave your body right now and come right back and just do it at will all the time, no matter what.
Yeah.
You can't do that if you're honest with yourself. There's going to be people who are so convinced that blah, 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 they can do it, all this stuff. It's like, so those people aren't going to listen to what we're saying.
Right.
This is for those people who you're just faking it. Okay. We know you're faking it. Okay. And we're saying it's okay to stop faking it, because the problem with why you think you have to fake that is because you don't see any alternative.
Yeah.
You're like, if I don't convince myself I'm happy, there's just immense suffering. That's it.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, maybe there's going to be suffering. There's suffering anyway. But what if you could stand up and like all those things that you're trying to get, that's not real, like be a superhero. It's not real. But if you stand up and you do what's best, you're doing the thing a superhero would do. Do you see what I mean? Like standing up, like imagine you stood up within yourself, and you're like, I'm gonna support myself. I'm gonna stop abusing other people just to get emotional energy. I'm gonna question all the reasons why I do things in an automatic way that's not actually best. That's not actually adding real substantial value to everyone's life. Just because I'm doing it automatically, I never questioned it. I'm gonna start the process of stopping doing those things, and I'm gonna look at how I can expand my abilities and my influence to support the world to come to a point where more and more people have what they need as a basic, like, automatic point. And that doesn't mean you have to take away from anybody else. Like, it just requires a creative solution. If it requires taking away from people, that's clearly not the solution, because that doesn't make sense. There's more than enough. The only reason we believe in lack, it's like, think about it. If you're in the elite and you want to maintain control, just make everyone think that there's not enough. Because then it's like, they're going to justify why those people then have to control everything, because you can't do it. So you're like, well, fuck, somebody has to make sure everything's kind of okay. And that's why we're at where we're at right now in our world, where it's like everybody has to wear masks because you can't be trusted not to spread a virus. And now it's going to be, the next thing they're going to do is climate lockdowns. And they're going to say, because of climate change, you can't use so much energy and all this other stuff. It's coming. Everything that we do will be controlled, micro-controlled, to prevent any harm. But no one's going to enjoy that. No one's going to like that.
Now, looking at everything, so Drake, remember at the beginning, I don't remember if it was while we were recording or before, but you were like, yeah, I also went pretty deep into spirituality. I say I did so as well, but not to that degree. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, definitely not to that degree. Like,
because you're coming from a different point, because you were told that you were really smart as a child, and were like, you like literally in school, they're like, you're gifted, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah,
so
for sure.
it was like a different starting point for you. So can you tell a little bit about that?
Like, what specifically?
In terms of, how Cameron, he went through wanting to do more than just be part of the system. Your process.
For me, it was more so just like, I recognized I was smart. I knew I was smart. And I just saw it as other people are dumb, more so. Like, really, because like what I was thinking of or coming up with just seemed more so just like, duh. Like, and my mom even told me, she would correct me all the time of like, you can't just say people are dumb. You can't just like, you can't ask questions like those, because they're gonna think that you're mean or something like that. And so she was trying to prevent me, I guess, from being ostracized.
Right.
But I just saw it as like, all right, other people just don't get it. And I tried to fit in. I really did try to fit in with other people, but I felt like on a lot of levels, it was just like, we're not connecting. They don't understand me. They don't get it. And so when I was, I guess by the time I got to high school is when I was really questioning things. Because before that, I was brought up very religiously, and so I was like very much into reading my Bible and really into like, I'm serious, and just thinking that I would become like a pastor or something like that.
Wow.
And
damn, remember at the Copes when you did that, your little pastor display? You were meant to be a pastor, man. That blew me the fuck away. That was amazing.
Within that is like, I did a lot of like practicing of that.
Right.
Whether as a joke or as like, I seriously believed that was what I would become. And then I started in middle school. I remember like being friends with the pastor of my church, his kids. Uh-huh. And like, those are my closest friends, because I had moved to a new school and they just happened to move to that school right after I did. Okay. And so it was just like, oh, okay, cool. We get to be friends, And then going to that youth group and feeling like this is what life is about, like that's really how I felt. Like this is what life is about. And then people challenging me within that and questioning, like, you guys are just like part of a cult, and like, oh, you just don't understand, you don't get it, you know. And then
So you've already had experience with this stuff.
yeah, just a little bit, yeah. But then things in my personal life were starting to go really sour, where I wasn't getting like the support or the good feelings that I needed anymore. And I was just feeling like there's got to be some kind of answer. God must have some answer for me. You know, like this isn't right. You know, I sin every once in a while, but I'm really good. Like I'm much better than those other kids. And, you know, those are the kinds of thoughts that were going through my mind. And I remember asking one of the youth pastors, like, hey man, I'm not this isn't working out for me. Like I'm not content. And I said something like, you know, how can I be content? And his response was like, God doesn't want you to be content. It was something silly
fuck?
like that. Yeah. And I was just like,
No way.
And I was like, no. my answer to that was like, no, I'm not accepting that. No, that's that can't be right. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And so with that, I started like, and I hated in church all the time, like church people, Christian people, at least in the circles that I was in, but that was a lot of circles because I didn't just go to one church. I would hear all the time, like, oh, those other religions, they're lost. They don't get it. You know, they say all paths lead to heaven, but that's not true. And, you know, we're the only path. And I'm like, okay, all right, cool. But why do those other people actually believe that? Why do they think that? Why do they feel that way? Right. And it was just really obvious to me of like, I was born with this. That's why I believe this. I'm sure if I was born in those other environments, like I could see that really clearly as a kid. You know, like it was just
that's because you weren't beaten as a child. Were you beaten?
I was beaten, dude.
Oh fuck, not bad enough then.
Yeah, I was. That's another story though.
Well, it's an important point that I want to bring up after.
Yeah. Okay.
But keep going. Yeah.
But within that, I remember just seeing really clearly, like, obviously that's the case. So it doesn't really make sense for me to diminish their religion. If I'm going to be a part of a religion, how can I diminish their religion when they believe for the same exact reasons that I believe?
Right.
It just didn't make sense.
It's just arbitrary anyways. Why?
Exactly. So I was like, and I was studying those other religions and I was just like, you know, there's nothing more crazy in those religions than my religion.
Right.
You know? And so that's when I got Conversations with God. I started reading that and it made so much sense. I had a breakdown because I was like, I had lived my entire life by these stupid rules. And like, now it was really clear to me, like, because I'd been looking for some kind of explanation, some kind of answer. And to me, that was it. It was just like, just somebody outside to just say, isn't that silly? And I'm like, yes, it is fucking silly. Like, well, why was I so adamant about this before? Like, I can see it so clearly now. And then,
see, but that is the point we were talking about earlier, which is with the spiritual, love is the answer. This just they've been programmed with that. It's the only thing they know. When we're pointing out the obviousness of it, there might be a little friction there, but we're looking for those people who are like, oh, dude, yeah, okay. I always did think it was bullshit. I just didn't want to say anything. I just didn't know what else to do.
Right.
You see what I mean?
Yeah. And the weird thing was like, I was 100% in on it.
Right.
And then like, well, when I first started it, I was like, I'm all in on this. And then it started to, as I was learning more and becoming more clear, it's just like bit by bit, it was like, wait, you're not doing what you're saying. You're not the person that the Bible's telling you to be. Like, why is it all these people don't fucking get it? Like that was like, and it started putting more doubt. And so then it's so funny because the next step that I went through was exactly what Bernard talks about, is like, the next step is you go into spirituality. You lose religion, go into spirituality. And that's exactly what happened to me. It was just like, all right, so cool. Now I know I don't have to do that stuff anymore. Now I'm going to live for how I want to live, like to feel good. I want to live to feel good. Right. And so,
Because we're like consciousness here to
right,
experience.
But
right.
I still want to be a good person.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I want to do it in a way where it makes me look like I'm actually the best person ever.
Right.
Like
And so it was just really just straight selfishness, just straight up, just like, I need to feel as good as I can.
But if somebody told you that was selfishness, you
I would
wouldn't
say,
agree, right?
no, I would agree with them. I would agree with them. And I would say, but that's necessary.
That's how it's supposed to be.
That's how it's supposed to be. Like, why wouldn't I want to be happy?
Guys, obviously the problem with the world is everyone's not selfish enough.
Exactly.
Like, come on, like that's so obvious.
Exactly.
Like, don't you know about
Because
market forces?
no one's selfish enough. That's why the world is so shitty.
That's right. That's right. That's how I actually believed and felt. And I was just like, all right, let me just go down this this path, because I'm consciousness. I came here to experience life, and that's my purpose. And so I need to experience like as much joy as I possibly can. And just forget about everything else. Don't like that's my focus. My focus is just to experience joy and just kind of block out everything else. And that's what I tried to do. And I got really into like Abraham Hicks, and I thought that I was like the most spiritual person and super wise and shit like that. And you couldn't tell me shit, man. You couldn't tell me shit, because I was just like, I was this was the only thing that I could be sort of
Superior at.
yeah, superior in, a little bit like somewhat stable within as well.
Okay.
Because I hated so much that I'd given up so much of my personal directive will, if you call it that, like giving up all of my choices to this religious thing because I thought that I had to.
Mm-hmm.
That I was so upset by that and what that led to for me, that I was just like, I'm not fucking budging on this one. Like I'm gonna have fucking fun. I'm gonna enjoy what I want to enjoy as much as I want, and you're not gonna be able to sway me in any way.
This one basically said, listen to yourself.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so then that's when I was able to get into like drinking and smoking. Like I wasn't into any of that stuff as a kid. Like all that stuff really deterred me. It was like, no, why would I ever do that? It didn't make sense to me. But then when I was like, okay, I get to live for myself, it's like, I'm gonna fucking try that. I'm gonna do it. Like, who's gonna stop me? What's gonna be the consequence? And just like really going into that shit. Like I wasn't like Cam. I was like Cam in the sense that like I couldn't really go out and talk to people like that, but I was really good at selecting people to be my friends who could do that. And so I would just hang around them and just keep hanging around them until I was like, okay, cool. Now we're friends. You're my friend now. I want these things, and I know that you can get them, and that's what would happen, you know? And so, so yeah. And within that, I still believe that I was being very spiritual within like, eating mushrooms and taking acid.
Like, isn't that so funny? It's like, why is there such a massive convergence between spirituality and doing drugs?
Because it feels that way.
They both have the same effect. It's take you out of reality and into your mind.
Yeah. Yeah. It really does feel that way. It really feels like you have the answers, and it feels like, oh, this is so good. Like I never considered these things before, or never considered from this perspective before. And so this must be real, because no one else is talking about this. And this is what they're trying to hide from me. This is why my life is so shit, because, you know, they don't want us to actually,
that's why they're illegal.
Life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know, and so, yeah. So that was pretty much like my journey. I got really into The Secret, seemed to like line up with that for me as well.
Right.
You know, the law of attraction lined up with that for me. And all of those feelings, it was just like, okay, I will just listen to things that make me feel good. And so if you had like another like spiritual kind of person that came in and said, life is really about, making the world a better place for others by doing so, I'd be like, yeah, fuck that. That's stupid. No, it has nothing to do with me feeling good and just like feeling however I want to feel about things. So no, I'm not going to go with that route. I don't like it. So it must be wrong. It's stupid. And if you think that that's the way to do it, then you do it that way. I'm going to do it my way because my way is right. And I was very like adamant about that.
So well, yeah, what got you to shift out of that?
Literally just talking with Cameron. but seriously, because like even before I had Technitude, I would send Cameron like all the Abraham stuff because I was still really listening to a lot of Abraham during that time, and just like I would send him like, hey, Abraham says this and Abraham says that, and Cameron's responses would be like, okay. And they'd be like, I don't understand. Like, is he not into Abraham? Like, I don't really get it.
Like you're a gym member, right? Like,
yeah, like
he said, asking and is given is 100%. 99 if not 100% on
right. And Cam's like really smart. So like, and he talks about some stuff that's like, what I perceived as spiritual as like, dimension. So like it's out there. So I know like he's cool, but like what the fuck, And so
like, how's your dick not getting hard at listening to Abraham?
Right? Like, come on, get hard with me. No.
Like we're supposed to be getting off on this shit.
But it was like I said before, just talking with Cameron, I could see like he was very stable within what he was saying. And I didn't want to accept it, but it just made so much sense. He was so stable within it that I was like, I should at least look at it. I should at least consider what he's saying. Not that I automatically believe him, but let me just consider it and be, I didn't even want to like be open to it. It was just, I'm going to consider it. I'm not going to outright reject it. Let me just look at it. I'll look at it. That was it. And he would send me things like all the time, all the blogs, the creation's journey to life or heaven's journey to life, or like some kind of destiny something, and
like some article or like
yeah,
and
I'd look at it and I wouldn't respond to his texts. I'd just like look at it and go like, I'd read through it because that's what he was saying. Like he was saying something like in his text, like, hey, read through this, it's going to support you. You may not understand it right now, but this will support you. And I'd read through it and I'd be like, why the fuck does he send me this shit? That's honestly like how I felt. I was like, this doesn't make any sense. What is this? What's the purpose of this? That's what my process was like.
Mm-hmm.
And I would listen to the audios that he would send and I'd be like, why? Who is this guy? Why would I care? Like, what does this have to do with me? What does this have to do with what I want? Like, I was still very much in that mode, but I would listen to it every time he'd send it. But that was just how I felt about it. It's just like, okay. And it took a while before I got to the point where I was like, I could actually comprehend something out of it. Like I'd get any kind of value out of it. It took a long while. And a lot of it was in between me having those kinds of experiences of like, what the fuck? From each one that he would send, every once in a while we'd get on the phone and he'd challenge me hard. And I'd be like,
he's super good at that.
Yeah. And I'd be like, what he's saying does make sense. Like
you realize you're not as smart as you think you are.
Right.
Yeah, I thought I was certain in this stuff and I'm not.
Right. And so I'm like, okay, all right. That does kind of make sense. I didn't always like it, but at the end of it, I always felt like, I think he's actually trying to help me.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I think he actually, like, I should really look at what he said. I should really consider that. and I'd go, okay, all right, well, that I can see from his perspective, what he's saying. Yeah, okay, all right. And that's pretty much it. And like, it was just more and more of that until the point where I could start to see it on my own. I could start to see it on my own, because a lot of those times when he was challenging me, he was actually helping me through something, helping me through some kind of belief or program or whatever that was actually negatively impacting me in that moment. And so he could show me how me holding on to like this belief or that idea or whatever it was creating that consequence for me. And I was like, oh, okay, well, if I do that, let's see what happens. And I would do it, and it would be, oh, okay, well, yeah, he was fucking right about that. And there's just enough of those times where I was like, okay, I think I got to stop doing the drugs. Like there's no purpose in it anymore. And that was something that was like, I want to say hard to give up. It wasn't necessarily that like stopping it in itself was hard. It was just making the decision to say, I'm not going to do that anymore. Like I know that was fun. Like I enjoyed it so much and all this. And like I thought I was getting some value out of it, but then making the decision to just go, I'm not going to do that anymore. That was like tough to me, because it was like, well, maybe there'll be one day where I really want to do it.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
and why can't I just do it? But then like when I had made that decision, then I could see things really just like, oh, I was kind of trapped in this like idea or this belief that I was actually in control of all of that. And I could see that more and more clearly. And I could see like how that controls other people, how that controls our society. I could see how like people drinking, going out to drink, is just like, oh, everyone's just trying to escape. Oh, and then like it just started to compound of like, oh, okay, wow, yeah, that makes sense, and it's still like my process was still going on, long process, but that's pretty much how I got to the point where I was like, okay, spirituality is bullshit. I could see that, yeah, and drugs is bullshit, drinking is bullshit. It's all just a manipulation to control. And it's like, okay, I'm not going to participate in that anymore. And from there, then I was able to really go in on like, let me actually try to understand this. Let me actually try to understand this material. And then it stopped being so ethereal and stopped being so like,
yeah,
like crazy and just like making me uncomfortable. And more so is just like
you have to not understand in order for it to be like magical and wonderful and like, whoa, like this everything's just so amazing. It's like it has to be shit that you don't understand.
Right.
And I'm seeing that through a post on my Facebook. It's like, I think there's just phenomenons that we don't understand, like the 100th monkey syndrome and all that stuff. And I remember when I first discovered the 100th monkey syndrome and all that stuff, and I was reading about it, I was like, wow. I was trying to think about the mechanisms of how that would work. But I remember when I met up against the information I had available to me, I was just like, it's just a cool phenomenon that I don't understand. And it's like, it's really amazing. And that's what's going to like, that's what we need to get to. Like enough people just studying stuff or like waking up to what's happening, and then it'll work. But
and that's what I thought the solution was too. Is like,
right.
I believe
people waking up.
Yeah, people waking up. People just like, everyone just needs to be exposed to Abraham. If everyone just like listens to Abraham, then we'll all be good. If everyone just like understood, like just love everyone.
But the thing is, like, who measurably is the best at the law of attraction?
The elite.
Yeah, the ones making all the shitty fucking laws that are in their favor that don't benefit anybody else.
Yeah.
So
aren't they the money magnets?
Yeah, exactly. Like they're the ones making all the money and everything. So how does it? And you could say, oh, but they're doing it for the wrong reasons. It's like, where in Abraham Hicks does it say you have to do it for a certain reason?
It doesn't.
In fact, they deliberately say a child starving they technically attracted it to themselves.
Right.
So like it doesn't change anything. And if you're not already a fucking master at the law of attraction and you're 20 or 30, you ain't never gonna master it. Do you know what I'm saying? Like you're not like fucking Bill Gates created Microsoft when he was in his 20s.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Steve Jobs, like these guys were already doing it. They already did it. It's not like you're ever gonna catch up. So everyone has that. Well, if everybody just figured it out, and that's why I was saying before, if it doesn't require you to change, it's not the solution.
That's such a massive point. And I think if you look at Drake's life versus Cameron's life, it's like Cameron got more fucked up as a child. It's like he had worse consequences. And it equal to how deep he went off into all that stuff. Right? But luckily, he had a really high processing ability, so he could just get to the end of those really quickly. Versus, it's like me, I just got to pick one and fucking hope that that's the right one because I can't read. You know what I mean? So obviously I can read, and I was propped up as like, you know, top in my school, but it's like I was so beaten, literally. Like fear was put into me so deeply that it's like it was no longer a fear thing because I just learned to just follow whatever's in front of me. And if it wasn't for Kian, I wouldn't have questioned all this stuff, right? Because he was already questioning it because he was a middle kid. Middle kids always get the weird treatment of the group. So he's questioning everything and he's pulling me along with him. And I'm like, I don't know what the fuck you're on about, but I'm just trying to like, you know, be in high school, then go to university. But he was making a lot of money. And I could see obviously that people only cared about money. So I was like, why am I going to go to school to make like $50K a year after 4 years and a lot of money investment when I'm already making way more than that without any of that? But I was so obedient that I still did it just because mama. Right. And, you know, you justify it with like, I want to experience that. I want like, you know, maybe that's whatever, because like Cameron said, it's like, you don't know the alternative. Right. But what has become so clear is all that it's doing is, you know, so over time I discovered the spirituality and, you know, there's groups like different groups about consciousness and what happens, you know, where you came from and where you're going. And yeah, Abraham Hicks, Esther and Jerry Hicks. I didn't go that deep because I was very superficial, but I went deep enough where that was at the forefront of my mind, at least. Where I was like, when I found out about the universe and all that, I was like, yes, I knew there was something that made more sense than God. It's like the exact same fucking thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, yeah, like I don't necessarily believe in God.
Right. Yeah.
Right. But I believe in like this.
Yeah.
And it's like, see, I felt like now I have a one up on people who believe in God. Now I have like a one up. Now I'm cooler. Now I'm on to the next level. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm glad you brought up what Bernard says about how you go out of religion and into spirituality. Right.
Yeah.
It's like, it's the perfect fucking trap.
Yeah.
It's like when you're too cool for Nike, so then you start wearing Adidas. And you're like, yeah. When you're too cool for Ford, so then you get a Chevy. Right? And you're like, all those fucking Ford losers, like they don't get it yet. They don't get it. Right? And it's like, what I didn't understand, what took me so long to just understand the basics of, was what is the result of believing in that? I mean, if you look at it, the result of it is you do nothing. Like Cameron said, you don't have to change. You just realize that you're here to be grateful, because gratitude is like the highest frequency, gratitude and love, and just be grateful about all the contrast and all that bullshit. And I remember when I got that piece of information of like those kids who are starving and dying and all that stuff, it's like they chose to be there. Before they came here, they chose to be there. And therefore you don't have to worry about it because that's just contrast for you to be grateful for where you're at. I was like, perfect. I remember being in the basement and just being like, fuck yes.
Yeah, I had no
Perfect.
idea what to do to help them. So thank God it was that easy.
Like now I don't have to think about that shit anymore.
I was starting to feel guilty.
Exactly. I was like, that was making me feel really bad. I would see the ads on TV. I was like, oh great, now I don't have to fucking donate to that bullshit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like I wasn't donating anymore. Anyways, I was young, right? But
I don't have to think about donating anymore. Yeah.
exactly. Like I don't have to feel bad about not donating anymore. And it was like just watching, and this is the information that I gathered over time, because people would also reach out to me or try to convince me that Abraham Hicks is the answer. Right. And when people are arguing with you, they're not gonna like say, you'll be like, are you really happy? They'll be like, yeah, 100%. You're like, shut the fuck up. You know what I mean?
Of course. Yeah.
It's like, I know that I'm not happy, but I'm not measuring that feeling of happiness is
Who gets to determine what makes you happy though?
it's programmed. It is.
No, I know, but I'm saying like if you were to ask a person, like who gets to determine what makes you happy?
They say they do.
Right, but what if what makes one person happy is murdering you?
Right, exactly. Or now what's hot is it's not called
Like what happens if
pedophilia,
what makes
but it
one
is
person happy
pedophilia.
conflicts with what makes you happy?
Yeah. Like, like pedophilia is pretty hot right now.
Oh, that's
Right.
right. What's it called now? Like
It's something of feel
Nia something. I don't know.
like nephi. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, what if what if that's your kid that they're coming after?
Oh shit.
Right? Are you justifying that? Are you saying that like, okay, if that's what their truth is, right? Like if that's what like if the
But
expression
the
of
thing is,
consciousness
people
within
will
that
go
person,
to lengths to try and argue that somehow that
Right.
does make sense.
right?
Because
that's
otherwise
the
they'll
argument.
have to question their starting point of what they're doing.
Dude, if you're willing to go to that length, you are fucking full of abuse. Like you.
Well, that's what you're justifying. Like you're literally justifying it. And then you say, well, it doesn't matter. There's no consequence anyways. It's all just contrast. And it's like, well,
Okay.
then,
Let me murder you.
okay, no. Or how about this experiment? If it really doesn't matter, then don't focus on how you feel. Like, what's the consequence of you living your whole life and never feeling good?
Well, if it doesn't matter, then you just die. So it
What
doesn't
would
matter.
it matter whether you did or didn't? Like, if it didn't, just don't even make the effort. Like, what does it matter?
Yeah.
Like people, they turn their purpose into literally not having any purpose whatsoever.
Yeah.
And they think that's their purpose. My purpose is just to feel good. It's just to be here and live. It's like, well, then why do you try to do anything?
There's a song. There's this rapper named Watsky. He's more like of a poet, and he became a rapper. And at the start of one of his songs, it's like some guy's doing like a voice, and he's like, "Nothing matters, so it doesn't matter that nothing matters." I remember thinking about that. I'm like, true. Nothing matters, therefore it doesn't matter that nothing matters. So why are people using nothing matters as a way to justify that what they're doing is right?
They're trying to make it matter what they're doing.
Exactly.
By saying nothing matters. And it's like, but you're totally defeating your own argument.
Exactly. Because you're saying that you need to be like going after your happiness and like.
That's exactly what I'm saying. So if nothing has any consequence, then just don't focus on feeling good. Like prove that it's true. Like what would be the consequence? Like what would be the so let's just flip it back. What would be the consequence of you feeling good your entire life? Living your whole life in bliss and then you die. What would be the consequence of that?
Of when you die?
Nothing. It wouldn't equate to anything.
So literally you didn't matter.
Holy fuck.
So if you just going based on how you feel, like, and this is where people start to get into all this extra stuff where it's like, well, but we're just a temporary experience here. And then, imagine the only thing that you actually know is real physically, you think is the only thing that's not real.
Yeah.
And you're really hoping that afterwards something else is more real.
That's legitimately where I was at.
That's literally just religion.
Yeah.
So people who think that they went to some new level with spirituality, it's like,
yeah,
you're doing the exact same thing. You don't realize that in the design of our world, in the design of consciousness, spirituality was placed as just the next trap when people started obviously realizing how dumb religion was, they were like, well, fuck, I mean, okay, give them spirituality. And they're like, oh, because what did not change within the person? What didn't change?
That they don't have to take responsibility.
They
Right.
just
So they were like,
want
well, here's something that's not religion, but you still have to take responsibility. Like, okay, cool. It's like you didn't change. So it
Yeah.
can't be the answer to anything being better because the world is the result of your starting point of who you are.
Mhm.
So it's funny because everyone wants to say we're all one source, we're all one collective. But then they don't want to admit that therefore who they are, their starting point, the actual source of their life, you see what I'm saying? Like the origin of everything they're doing has any effect in this world.
Mm.
Like it doesn't have any effect whatsoever. But I don't have to do anything because the source of all is love. Well, but then clearly that would have no effect. So what does that even mean?
Now, the typical timeline, and again, the depth that you go is equal to the abuse or how shitty reality is for you, for your specific situation. But if you really look at it for yourself, right, whoever's listening to this, and there are a couple of people in Self-Perfected who've walked themselves out of that, but who I could clearly see that in the beginning, they were like, were coming from Jin and they were super just like, just fucking gone to like energy and universe. And I'm just like my twin flame, but things aren't working for some reason, but maybe it's just like contrast and I need to, it's like, no, things aren't working because you suck at maintaining relationships. Like you have no idea how to work through your shit. Right. And it's not a point of judgment. It's like, I just want you to acknowledge that so you can start working on your shit. Cause that's what I had to do. Right. But it's like, I was just talking to somebody yesterday who is like, yeah, my path, and they found Technotutor and all that. And they're like, oh man, that's so true what you're saying, because my path was like, as soon as I was super rambunctious, my mom couldn't control me. And then, I went over to my dad's side of the family and they put me in place heavy. So once I kind of came out of that, it was like, I found meditation and I started meditating. But all meditation gets you to do is exactly the same thing that fucking ayahuasca and taking LSD and shrooms gets you to do. It's the same thing that, becoming very spiritual gets you to do, and believe that, love is some dimensional plane that you have to go up to. But it's just getting you to remove yourself out of reality and go into your mind. And one of the things we were talking about on that call, I was like, at some point, didn't we all want to become monks to some degree? Like we're all like, whoa, monks are cool, right?
I was straight up going to go live in the woods and just meditate at one point.
I was thinking about going to like Asia and finding these temples and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
And then
my
you
brother,
get there,
my brother even more.
And then you get there and they're like, okay, so on Thursdays, that's when we rape you. And you're like, wait, what? We rape all the little kids. And you're like, oh, what are you talking about? Like, what do you think really happens at these fucking places?
Oh,
really?
shit.
What happens in prisons?
Oh, fuck.
Like, think
you talking
about
the monk temple? No. Tell me what?
Oh, no, but they're spiritual. They're such great, wonderful people. It's like they're people that literally are okay with just going and sitting in a spot all day because they're trying to get to some place of heaven.
Dude.
Their whole starting point is selfishness.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But that was like the thing that I couldn't see until I was upping my ability to see shit. And it was like, we pedestalize, if that's even a word, but we idolize that point of being able to like meditate like monks and be like, that's the idea of transcendence, right? It's like, that's the idea of transcendence, where the result is you're fucking useless and you spend all your time just meditating. You're like living in some other. So the point being that the Cameron's realization, it's so succinct. It's like, oh, I can't feel happy all the time because this world is created, not the world, but like the world that we live in today, the system that we live in is designed to make sure you don't feel happy, right? It's like, I can't feel happy because everybody's not happy. So the only way, if you believe love is the answer and bliss is the answer, what's the only way that you can experience that?
Imagine if people were as adamant about doing what is best for all as they are about holding on to that feeling of like, I just have to feel bliss. You just got to feel love. You can't, you can't shake them like the way that I was, you know,
Right,
you
right.
can't shake them otherwise. It's like, imagine if you put that kind of determination even towards your own fucking goals and dreams and shit, you know, but they won't even do that, you know, like their purpose or their goal. What was that?
I was just saying true. It's
Oh,
like such
yeah.
obvious proof that
Yeah.
the only reason you're putting so much energy into that is because you don't have to change.
And so they've made that, it's like what Cameron was just saying, like, I don't know, 5 minutes ago, whatever, but like they've made not having a purpose their purpose, but they hold on to that so strongly as if it were actually their purpose.
That's their purpose.
Like the way that you would actually treat a purpose. And then they have no fucking clue how to treat a real purpose. They have no clue like how to have a real purpose. You know what I mean? It's like, it's so interesting because yeah, go ahead.
It's like the only way you can experience that as valid is in your mind. Because anybody could fucking look at you while you're meditating and be like, okay, what are they doing? Okay, no. They're eventually like, they'll go do something, right? And you're just watching this. Like imagine just watching somebody who's just meditating. And then they're just like on their computer, like listening to Abraham Hicks. And they go back into meditation and they eat and shit and just do that. But really, it's like in between that, they're working their job for like 8 hours a day.
I just want to put this point in, and I'll let you go, Cam. But just real quick, because I'm seeing this more clearly now. It's like those people have made a decision to do that. You know, like in order to hold on to that so fiercely, you've made a decision to do that. And that I think Cameron might have said that to me, you know, in the past. And I was just like, what? No, I didn't make a decision. Like, this is who I am. This is, you know, how I feel.
Right.
You know,
it's like your identity. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's like, you're actually making a decision to avoid doing everything else. Go ahead, Cam.
You know, there's people who think like if we all just get around and we have millions of people meditating one day, it'll raise the vibration. Do you ever see those things?
Yes. Yeah, all the time.
World Meditation Day. If everyone could just meditate, right?
At 11:11, for some reason, it's Central Standard Time because
I know I've said this before, but I just want to make it clear. Let's say we got everybody in the world to start meditating, and after this, we can talk about everybody channeling or lucid dreaming or doing ayahuasca. Whatever your thing is, just insert it here. Let's say we got everyone in the world to do that thing.
Do what
all
you're
on the same
suggesting.
board. Yeah. What is it? And you guys play the role of that person. Okay. What is it that would happen after that? What is it that you're saying is the result of that?
Everyone would just feel love and feel connected.
No, that's fine. But what would you notice? What is the change? How would you see that play out?
Fear. There would be no more fear. Like everybody could feel like they can count on each other. And
why does that matter?
Well, because then
how would that change
the higher plane?
But what would actually change in our reality? What would we be experiencing differently?
We would have more positivity. We would have more positivity, and people would want, you know, like, I think we would take care of the earth better. You know, the earth wouldn't be such a toxic place. And yeah.
Would there be starving people?
No. But
would there be child abuse?
No.
World peace, baby.
Would there be war?
No.
Would there be corrupt politicians?
No. Because everyone would just love each other.
Would there be murder and rape?
No.
And all it would take is 68 seconds while us together. Okay,
so in other words, and I'm hopefully anybody who's thinking that they have some kind of way of changing the world, that's what they're thinking. They want to change it too. Like we're all in agreement, I would say, on that.
Yeah.
This shit needs to change. Yeah.
Like we're all in agreement of, okay, these are the bad things in the world. Like, we're all here to learn a lesson. Okay. So the child who's suffering and in poverty and everything, that's for me to learn something, right? But if I learn my lesson and they learn their lesson, and then we come back to this earth, would we expect there to be more or less poverty or the same? If everybody in the world that's on earth that exists learned all their lessons that they're supposed to learn, and we got to that point where everybody learned the lessons, what would we expect that reality would be like?
Are we still playing the devil's advocate here?
Regardless, no poverty. Regardless, even if it was
right.
Yeah.
Like, otherwise, would you say we all learned our lesson? Like, if
Yeah.
we're not in a more loving world where everybody's loving, compassionate, and feels good and has a great time and trust each other and there's bliss and everything, wouldn't you agree somebody hasn't learned their lessons? We haven't learned our lessons yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So however you want to frame it as the thing you think needs to happen for something to change, don't we all agree on what that change would be? Like the end result, the picture, how we would experience ourselves, what the world would be a more loving world, a place where people are not in fear, where you have enough. You see what I'm saying?
Hmm.
So that's what we're saying. The difference between what we're saying versus anybody else at all is we're saying we just need to figure out how the actual physical systems work in this world that make it so that you don't trust your neighbor. Like, why don't you trust your neighbor?
Because I'm afraid they're gonna take something from me.
Right. Because if literally everyone had what they needed, then somebody might say, well, but that's just human nature. But that means they didn't learn their lesson.
Right.
Learning your lesson would means you change that part about yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm saying we already changed that part. Yeah.
Yeah.
What is
It's
it
funny when someone says that's just human nature. Would they do that? Are you saying you're gonna do that?
But what is it that creates human nature?
Right.
Environmental circumstances.
Isn't it like your parents?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Your
You know,
experiences.
and like, yeah, your environment. Like, if you always had enough, wouldn't you wouldn't come from that point of lack anymore.
Yeah.
And if you still had enough, like there was no reason for you to still steal at all. Like you would just not do it.
Yeah.
You would, and if you were educated to see like it doesn't make sense, you would be like, okay, there's no reason to do that. I have enough. I could just help this other person or whatever.
Yeah. Like I don't steal. It's
You don't need to do it. Okay.
Yeah.
But in a world where a parent has kids and their children are starving and the person stole to feed their kids, would you really judge that person?
No, of course not.
Like you'd be like, well, I mean, they
I
had to do what they had to
understand.
do.
Yeah.
So if we created a situation where that wasn't necessary, then if somebody stole, you'd be like, what are you doing? And
Right.
also you'd be like, why'd you do that? I'm just going to get another one. Why do you need two of the exact same thing that is really like, why do you need two of the best vehicle? We all can have vehicles. Like we all already have all the best ones. So why are you trying to steal mine? Like, what's the point? There wouldn't be jealousy because you have enough. Like we look at all the things that are like the negative elements of human nature. It's all because we have a system that's competitive, that's based on if I don't win, I will lose. It's
I
the
will not have.
environment. You're right. It's the environment. It's the way everything is set up. So now if you consider that for a moment, you could argue with that. You could argue and say, well, you can't change any of that stuff. But then your argument would have to be, it's going to magically change because we're all ascending. Or it's going to magically change because everyone would meditate. Well, what would that meditation do? Would it teach everybody, oh, I don't need to steal? But if they realized I don't need to steal, and then they went back home and they don't have a car and their neighbor does, how is that going to help them? Wouldn't they immediately go back to, oh, wait, but I do have to steal because I don't have enough. Like, I don't even have a job. What am I going to do? I don't have food. What do I do? Let me meditate. Okay, everybody meditate again. Okay, what wouldn't you expect the result of that meditation is everybody be like, hey, why doesn't this guy have enough food? Like, hold on a second. We need to change some things here because this guy, if I'm looking at how the whole system is designed and how all the, like, if I was looking at it, like how all the resources are being, I'm like, there's not enough resources going here. What's going on there? Why is that occurring? Oh, why is this guy making so much money over here by selling missiles to the government to bomb these people over here and creating more suffering over here? And that guy, his kids are in private school. And so they'll get a really good education in the system. They'll go to Yale University and they're going to get jobs just like that. And this guy over here, his kids are just going to like have to fucking do whatever they're doing. But it's like, you don't see that those physical things in reality are actually what's directing reality. Mm. And instead you ignore all of that and you go, well, I don't know. I mean, I watched on the latest Galactic Federation Palladian channel. They were saying, I think we're in the fifth dimension now, or it's like we're getting there or something. So I think we're all get there.
It's all going to clear up.
But you didn't even look at any of the actual practical and like, look at your own life. Do you sit down and go, well, I do have to pay my car payment, but the Pleiadians did say that it's like, you don't think like that in your own life. When you have to take a shit, you don't go, I'm just going to hold it in. I don't need to shit it out. That's physical reality isn't real. It's not real.
You know,
I don't need to eat or drink today. I don't.
That it's a really good point, because it's like on Facebook, right? You'll make a status, for example, and you'll get all these people commenting like very spiritual stuff, right? And then you'll be like, what do you do for a living? And it has nothing to do with what they're saying. They'll be like, the purpose of life is like to love and to give and to put yourself, like, whatever. And then you're like, okay, what do you do? Like, I clean houses. Like I'm
an Uber driver or something. It's like,
exactly. Like or even, I'm a lawyer, like whatever, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
not to say that they're at the bottom rungs. I'm just saying it's like, they're just working. It's like they're living some split life where it's like, yeah, this is the purpose of life and this is what we should be doing. Right. But it's like, but I also have, like, that's different from what this is. And that's where everybody gets it all twisted, is like, there's this thing that you do in your personal time that's like living your purpose or meditating or becoming more spiritual. But it's
Yeah.
like, do you think Jesus went to work at the fucking factory or like, picking cotton or
Well,
like,
he was a carpenter.
right? But it's like his everything that he did revolved around one point. And it was then what he thought was like, okay, we got to put these systems in place so nobody has to struggle and all that stuff.
Yeah. Hey guys, we should really treat our neighbors as ourselves, because we should really like do unto others as we want done unto us. Yeah, that sounds great. Give them fish. Like, okay, yeah. Give them fish, but like, why don't we just like teach them all how to fish? Whoa,
Yeah.
whoa.
Because what about tomorrow?
Whoa,
Like
Jesus, I am a fisherman. Like, that's my fucking job, dude.
the reason that person doesn't have fish is because they need to experience contrast. They have a lesson to learn.
Yeah.
Like, no, dude, this is a test for you to see that if you were given more than you needed, if you would ensure that everybody could have more than they needed.
Well, I can tell you the answer to that, Jesus. No.
Exactly. Put him on the cross.
Right? Get this guy on a cross.
Fuck out of here. Yeah.
Get this guy some lumber and some nails and get him the fuck out of my face.
You said you're a carpenter, right? Can you cut me real quick?
Yeah.
But the point is, it's like, it's so separate. It's like these clear distinctions between, Cameron, that's like you posted a status of money is the most important thing in life or in the world, right? And then you have all these people being like, no, love is. Okay, well then you come work for me and I'll pay you in love. Like, I'll give you a paycheck and love points.
You just come here the whole time you're working. I'm just gonna love you so much.
I love you.
Dude,
I
man,
just
fucking love that you do this for free, man.
I'm gonna give you them num-nums.
It's cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You see, it's like,
but isn't that what we would want though? It's like the thing that's prioritized most in life is like everyone's taken care of. That's what we would want. But we're not doing anything to create it.
it's not the world we've created.
Yeah. And it's like the part that we lose is differentiating between the world that we want and where we're at right now. Because there's a clear fucking difference. But anytime we talk about spirituality, it's like you get this energy of like, oh, it's like, wow, it's like, they're all stressed out. They're like putting on, and then you start the live stream and you're like, hello, everyone. Take a breath with me and release the tension for the day. We're here, right? And then you hear the sirens coming out from from Jake's thing, right? But the point is like, we're trying to artificially create that feeling, right? But it works out so perfectly because there's no accountability if you're just looking at how you feel. And then, because then you create this entire framework of my truth, what's real to me and my reality and all this stuff, and my perception creates reality. So then you're like in this bubble, but then you're getting frustrated that like people aren't doing what you want, and like Bill Gates is like fucking things up, and they're going to mandate this and all this stuff. It's like, why are you complaining? You said that we're already all love, and your reality is you're good. And apparently we live in a reality where everybody's in their own reality, right?
Yeah. If everything is love and everything is love, blah, 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 don't complain about Hillary Clinton, Biden, Trump, Obama. Don't ever complain about anything.
Just be love.
Just be love.
Right? Be
So
the
why
change
would you
wanna see.
even argue with me? If I said love is not important, why would you even argue?
Uh-huh.
It's
Right.
funny because those people will be, if you push back, they'll become nasty.
Oh yeah.
You'll see
Yeah.
it.
Seen
They'll
that
be
a
like,
lot.
objectively, this person is a fucking asshole if they're challenged.
Yeah.
So it's all an act. It's
A character. What
it's like asking the janitor what it takes to run Exxon. They have a lot of ideas, but if they became CEO that day, what do you think would happen?
It would crash that fucking day.
Like suddenly, like it's like suddenly Texaco Phillips Exxon, like they fucking got bought. They're like same day. It's like they're fucked. You know, like the system is run by people who understand that money is the most important thing.
Yeah.
Until everyone realizes it's the most important thing and everyone has enough, we can't ever go beyond that. People think if we all just meditated and we realized we were all one, then we would just cooperate. We wouldn't even need money. Yeah. But that's like they don't understand how programming works. It takes time to change your programming.
Yeah.
Very few people want to be honest about how reality works. It's like, why not just be honest and be like, you know what? Everybody is evil and good. There's evil elements to you. There's good elements. None of that in itself matters. What matters is, does everybody have what they need, first of all?
Yeah.
Because unless that's happening, you're continuing to create generations of people who are coming from a point of, I need to take because this reality doesn't care about me. I have to survive. So it's like, what lesson are you here to learn if it's not that? Yeah. People say, oh no, life is just a school to learn, and we're just here to learn and grow and move on. It's like, but what is it that you're supposed to learn here? Like, why are you here in a physical reality where your actions and your thoughts manifest into actions which have consequences? If it's not to realize that the starting point of who you are will manifest a reality that reflects that.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Yeah.
Because then if you were to go into a reality where who you are manifests instantly, do you see what I'm saying? But who you are is not in every way what's best, like always doing what's best for all. You would instantly create like total fucking chaos. If people act like quantum reality, like they understand that, they don't even understand what that means, what it would be like to live in a world where there's no space-time. Like, and everything of who you are is just in real time. Reality is a reflection of that. Like, what would that create? At least we have the space and time here on this earth, in this life, to take the time to like figure out, oh, okay, that was the consequence. Okay, let me change that.
Right. Yeah.
Otherwise, you get fucked so fast.
You'd be just done. And it's, when I think about it really practically, if I was like a pro soccer team coach and I was looking at our rivals, let's say I'm Real Madrid. No, we're Barcelona, and our rival team is Real Madrid, two like very popular soccer teams, if you guys don't know. And I've been the coach, and I've got like 40 years left of coaching, let's say. And I'm watching who are the up and comers, the young kids, like the 9-year-olds, the 12-year-olds, who are gonna come on that team and get really fucking good, and they might kick our ass. But then I would go over there and pull that kid aside and be like, no. I would put them in some system, or get that the result of it is they believe that soccer is like bad, and getting soccer is bad, and like the best position that you can play to have the greatest effect for your team is the water boy. You should just be the water boy. No, sorry, not just be the water boy. In fact, without the water boy, nothing happens. It's like if everybody was the water boy, if everybody understood the point of the water boy, everybody would get it. And then get that fucking star player, like the kid who would be like Ronaldo or like Messi or whatever. It's like just get him focused on that. It's so obvious that wherever we're getting this information from, they are not doing that thing. Like Abraham Hicks has to like figure out how to fucking put on events and like, you know, learn to like speak and just, it's so funny because the way she just cuts people off. I remember I noticed that right away. She's like, I'm pretty sure she's just being a dick. And like just telling them.
Think about this real quick. The Abraham Hicks, all this stuff is the mainstream media of the bigger picture.
Huh.
Do you see what I mean? It's like CNN. And people think that they've got this special stuff because they're so special because no one gets it. It's like if what it's telling you doesn't challenge the system, then who do you think you're benefiting right now?
Yeah.
By following that information.
Yeah.
So it's like a way of trapping the people who otherwise would have kind of broken out and just getting them trapped into that. That's why everything we're doing is designed to support those people who would like have that potential to break out, to support the creation of a group that'll actually make a difference in the system.
Yeah.
Because we can't do it on our own. The point of this is not to just have people following us.
Right.
That is the point of Abraham Hicks. Is just to get more followers.
And
I was going to say, well, what would be the point of if it's just you who makes it out, right? If it's just you who's reached enlightenment, and then, okay, what about the rest of humanity? Like you'd be in enlightenment by yourself.
But there is no enlightenment.
Okay,
but even just what if, there, right? But even if what if it's like
I see your point, but I'm just saying for everybody, there is no enlightenment.
It's good to clarify that. Like reaching to the point where you understand reality. If you're the only one who understands reality, then what would you actually be doing? This is what you would be doing, because it wouldn't make sense for you to be understanding reality and then just let everyone else not understand it and just suffer. It's like, you don't understand it then.
Enlightenment, people think of it as something that's like you just in nirvana.
Yeah.
Like you're in a state of perpetual bliss.
Yeah.
Instead of it being, it dawns on you what the solution to the problem is.
Yeah.
That's how I see enlightenment. It's like, fuck.
Oh, I get it. Exactly.
Here's what's really going on. Here's what needs to be done. Okay.
Right.
You don't already get the reward. Law of attraction, all this bullshit, meditation is like you're trying to get the reward up front.
Yeah.
It's like you get the reward after you create the conditions where everybody can have it. Like that's giving as you want to receive.
Yeah.
If you get it before anybody else, that wasn't giving before logically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was going to say, it's like, if what everybody says, like, oh no, everybody does have to understand this. If we all wake up, then wouldn't it just be the practicality of it? It's like, how is everybody going to get it if you still have the media, if you still have like mainstream media? Isn't there always going to be people who never fucking get it because you're not making the effort to build something necessary to reach everyone, which can only be done through, for example, making a business and all that stuff, right? Drake, you gonna say something?
How are people going to get it if they're still stuck on the emotions and the feelings of the things that happened to them that created the conditions of their life? How are people going to get it if they think that what they're getting in school is a real education? Like, how are people going to get it if they can't even put 2 and 2 together? Like people are talking about 2 + 2 = 5. You realize that people are seriously arguing.
And
for
these
2
are like
+ 2.
Harvard level people.
Yeah.
Are you guys serious?
Trying to make these like philosophical arguments as to why 2 + 2 is actually, it could be 5. It is 5 in some cases.
But it's like, yeah, people are advocating for that. People are.
That wasn't just like a video of like that kid standing up and being like, that's not that skit video.
No, dude. Why are you always so fucking far behind on all this shit?
2 + 2 is 5. That's crazy.
It's because he doesn't spend time on Twitter.
That's true. That's actually why.
True.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. But yeah, like literally, they're advocating for things that don't make sense at all. Like it's how we talk about, kids that can't read, and they say, well, obviously the solution is to get kids to read. Well, that's racist. How
That's just colonialism. That's Western values, and it's like it's a basic skill that you need to be an
Okay,
equal in
okay.
this
If
world.
there's $5,000 and 2 + 2 = 5, then you take 2,000. I'll take the remainder, and we have equality.
where's the missing dollar, right? But like, okay, but actually consider that, right? If they're saying that reading is colonialism, right, and that's racist, they don't understand what reading is.
Damn,
They don't fully comprehend that,
that's so true.
right?
Uh-huh.
How is it that even the academics don't understand what reading is? And they're supposed to be telling us oh yeah, this is what's right and what's wrong. So okay, if even the academics don't even understand what reading is, how is it that we have like this trust in science or trust in any kind of expert? I was watching, did you ever watch that Barricade Garage video that I was telling you about?
No, not yet.
It has nothing to do with Barricade Garage, his normal skits and everything. It's just an interview of the guy who came up with the PCR testing, right? Saying specifically, and this was years ago, he was saying this specifically about Dr. Fauci, how he does not understand, or he's either like willfully obscuring things, or he really does not understand viruses and all of that stuff. And he's like, if you think that by using a PCR test that you can actually see a virus within it, you're using it wrong. Right? And how many people are exposed to this kind of information? Like, how many people are even just considering anything outside of what they've been given, literally been given and presented with?
Right.
And the reason why that's so important is because if we don't do that, then we're just allowing for the system to continue as it is.
Yeah.
You're not actually doing anything towards changing reality because you're not allowing for other people to get to the same point, to have that awareness so that everyone can be in love. Like, it's not going to happen because they can't understand it. Like that, it's obvious that, okay, what needs to happen is everyone needs to be highly educated, and everyone needs the space to be able to actually walk their process and do that, right? But it doesn't need to be like, oh, first you have to everyone just feels love first. That doesn't really make sense. It's like, let's just look at it practically. And that's part of the problem, is that people can't look at it practically. And so that's why we're here. That's why what we're doing is so monumental.
It's funny because if you look at like the medical field and all that, it's like what we prioritize over results is theory, which makes no sense. And the proof of that is if somebody has the right academic background, we'll value that over somebody saying, hey, I got results for this, curing this or healing this or supporting in the eradication of this. We'll be like, oh, shut the fuck up. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. When by definition, if you're listening to this, just look up, define academic. And it's theoretical knowledge as opposed to practical knowledge. So it's obvious that half the shit that they're talking about is not going to be it's not going to function the way they think it does in reality. Right. But here's a separate point that kind of clicked at one point was, you know how like the same spiritual people like whether it just be emanating love is the answer and all that, uh, they would also say that like children are like the pure expression of source energy or whatever the case may be. It's like Do children just meditate all day?
No.
Don't children like naturally come out and like punch each other and shit? Like try to take things away from each other? You know what I mean?
else? Children are the most abused.
Right.
I mean, that's obvious. Like that's the only way that we have so much abuse in this world and it keeps perpetuating is because as soon as children come into this world, they are abused right away.
But I'm saying it's like if the goal is to get back to what it was like to be a child, isn't the opposite of what a child wants to do sit down and do fucking nothing and meditate?
Right. They want to run around and play.
Yeah.
But
And
but
do
also
stuff and create
if
stuff.
you actually were loving, you wouldn't be focused on how you feel. That's the most important thing is like the only reason you would be focused on how you feel is because you're not love. So if you're doing things so that you can feel bliss, you're not love. By definition.
You know what? A great example of that is the way that you don't have to think about your breathing. It's taken care of, therefore you don't have to focus on it.
Think about Jesus.
Thinking about it.
Everyone makes him the best example of being loving, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he literally allowed himself to be crucified on a cross to wipe away everybody's sins. That's the idea, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if that is love, then how is focusing on you feeling good all the time love? Should be make the ultimate sacrifice that you can make. Because do you think that he was feeling good when that happened? If so, then it really was a meaningless sacrifice.
Because it's not really a sacrifice.
It had to be actually excruciating. And he actually had to really experience himself being crucified if it was a real sacrifice. Otherwise, it was just for show, and he could have just wiped away everyone's sins without having to do that. So if you take for that as the example, that you actually have to give something up. But what I'm saying is you don't need to literally go crucify yourself, like die. You just have to give up this point of it's my feelings first. Here's why. Simply because your feelings are being manipulated to keep you supporting the system as is, which is creating the conditions that's making you and everyone else live constantly from a starting point of not having enough. So you're constantly feeling like you're trying to get love, that feeling for yourself. By you focusing on that, you're constantly playing into the hands of those who know how to manipulate the little strings of everybody. If you would stop focusing on that and rather look at practically, mechanically, what needs to change in this world to create the conditions where everyone has what they need, we would all be feeling love all the time. It's like, why is Christmas so magical? Because when you wake up as a little kid, you run downstairs and there's just gifts for you. And you don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
But it's not about the material role.
And someone just magically gave them to you. But we know that's not how it works, is it? Somebody actually had to physically create it.
Right.
So what we're saying is we could all feel the magic of waking up every day with everything we need taken care of, and then have the time freedom to create whatever we want, because we don't have to go to a job every day and focus on a bunch of shit that we don't want. We don't have to go to school for 18, 12, whatever fucking years and study a bunch of shit. Everybody's learning the same shit. No one's actually learning anything. We're just competing based on memorization ability. You could actually spend those 12 years actually learning shit for real, to where the point. So imagine by the time you're 18, you're already creating your first masterpiece. Because that's like how we think of Einstein, but Mozart and these people is they're already at that age creating, in like, that's like the beginning of their creation, not, okay, now go get a job. Because those jobs aren't going to be here. If we're actually looking at where the system is moving economically and everything, those jobs aren't going to be there.
Yeah.
So in the future, the only option that exists outside of what we're suggesting is just basically entertain yourself until you die.
Jeez.
Have you ever played a video game where it's like you just end up grinding? I mean, it's pretty much every video game, really.
Like we're just
even
trying to
if
like
even if you play like if you like FIFA or 2K or whatever, it's like at the end of the day, you just end up learning how to game the system, and it just becomes a fucking chore.
Yeah, it feels like work.
It just becomes a chore no matter what. So it's like you're always looking for that next one and better graphics, but at the end of the day, it's not really satisfying.
Yeah.
That's what is going to be presented to everybody. But the the thing that'll be enticing is you won't have to worry about your survival anymore.
Yeah.
But you're not going to, there's the conditions for you to actually grow and create are not going to be there. Because the only way you can grow and create is if you change who you are. And if somebody says, look, you don't have to survive anymore, we're going to take care of all of that, just entertain yourself. Are you happy with who you are right now?
No.
It's like, what are you going to do all day? Just literally just fucking basically masturbate all day. That's not fulfilling.
Yeah.
Now, if that's all you can see, it seems like it's the next best thing. But it's not ultimately fulfilling. So what would be the best purpose you can give yourself is to push all of your possible limits that you can possibly perceive for yourself to solve the biggest problem that's ever existed, which is changing the system to be one that values life, so that no matter what you are, whether you're a rock or a tree or an animal or a person, doesn't matter what race, color you are, you have equal value. And you, based on your physical form, your needs are always met. And then the platform and the ability to be able to create and grow and make choices is there for you to do that without any restriction. And you're guided from the very beginning of your existence as a child to understand that your actions should always produce what's best for all through your own choice, not by being forced. But because if you do that, you won't create any conflict because there's no need for conflict. But if the starting point of your existence is, oh, gotta survive, gotta learn to play these emotional games because I'm trying to compete for attention from my mother and my father, and they're giving you these examples of emotional like instability and immaturity, and they're always nagging each other and calling each other names and fighting in front of you and like hitting your brother and smacking you and saying, don't be mean to your sister. And it seems like your sister's always getting favors and everything, and they like her more than you. So now you think maybe if I'm just a girl, I can get more attention from my parents. And fucking like, you know, your sister's being molested by your older brother. And so she wants to be a boy. And then, you know what I'm saying? Like, and then she's on the fucking cover of Vogue wearing a fucking suit because, you know, being a girl and being feminine, that's just the patriarchy. And it's just because she was molested because nobody was paying attention and people were abusing this other kid. And so he was like reacting. Do you see, like, see how it all is just like, you can look at everything and look at the environment and the context and no one's directing any of it.
Yeah.
But then when there's a consequence, suddenly we want to say, oh, we need to change everything in this world because this person doesn't feel comfortable in who they are. We didn't direct the environment to actually support that person to recognize who they are. So now, and think about all of this fits in perfectly for those who are already in control of all the resources.
Yeah.
If you're already in control of all the resources, you want people to be focused on fucking what gender and all this other shit, because that just fits into consumerism.
Yeah.
That's all it does. It doesn't actually stabilize anything.
It's not like now you can have a dude buying men's clothes and women's clothes. That's like
it's like
level.
Okay, if you're not Harry Styles on the cover of Vogue wearing a dress, you're just a random dude in your room wearing a dress. Is that actually fulfilling? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, Harry Styles is loving it because of all the attention he's getting. Great, fucking wear a dress. Who cares? Don't pretend like it's masculinity. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, don't lie about it. Just say you want to wear a dress and you want to be free and all that stuff. And that's how you feel good. Okay, fine. How does that put food on the table of a family who can't get a job right now and can't make money because their restaurant got shut down? And over here, this is oppressive. Not saying that men are not masculine if they wear a dress, which they're not. This question is, do you want to be masculine or not? But saying that men are not masculine if they're wearing a dress, how is that oppression? And saying someone can't go to their job because of a virus that has a 99.9% survival rate, that's not oppressive. That's protecting everybody.
Wow.
And also, there's no evidence to suggest there was any voter fraud or anything. There's no evidence of that. But there's definitely evidence of a pandemic where you don't know anybody who died from it. Like, think about it. Everything that there's not evidence for, it's like, well, I mean, the evidence is clear. And all of those experts who don't know what the fuck they're doing and keep flip-flopping back and forth, those are the experts. But the ones who are clear and consistent, those people are just propagandists. Do you see how everything is totally in fucking reverse? And to act like none of that matters, all you need to do is just love. Well, when you have kids and your kids are forced to go to school and they're forced to get the vaccine and they're forced to accept everybody being trans, and think about this. if somebody is a trans person, does that mean that they're any less deserving of a dignified life than anybody else?
No.
Of course not. But if your child says, well, clearly this person is trans because of the environment and all this other stuff, and then they say you're full of hate. Even if you say, well, I still think this person is a human being and they deserve a life of dignity, I don't see why that's hateful.
Yeah.
But then if you say you want to change the conditions to actually make it so that people are comfortable with who they actually are, like the value that we place on things artificially through consumerism makes everyone uncomfortable with who they are.
Wow.
It's because we have to compete. Think about it. Why do you feel like you need to
course.
be the most beautiful person in the world?
Because that's what Maybelline has told me.
But because that person competes at the highest level.
Yeah.
When you're the most beautiful person in the world, you get all the money, you get all the attention.
Yeah.
But if you're the process, if you're the result of evolution, which is just random fucking mixtures of DNA, and you're not beautiful, you suddenly feel like you're not worth anything.
Right.
The only reason it matters, though, is because you feel like you have to compete. So within you, there's this program, I have to compete, I have to be the best. And you're like, I can't be the best at anything. I'm ugly. And I'm not educated. You see what I'm saying? Like we have this whole world of people who, it's like if we're in a competitive world, then only a few people can actually experience being at the top.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean we have to take those people down and tear them down and make them ugly. But it's the game of competition that's the problem. We're using competition to determine whether you have a life of that would actually be worth living. You see what I'm saying? Why would it matter if you're ugly or not? Like there's trees that are ugly, but they're just as valuable as a tree that's pretty.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Like that shouldn't matter whether you have what you need. You shouldn't not water the one plant. You're still going to give you the wood. And in fact, when you bioengineer these fucking tomatoes to all look perfect, like they're devoid of nutrients.
Yeah.
So it's like the ugly tomato is actually more nutritious. All I'm saying is, do you see like this point of how it's this focus on we have to compete to survive that creates a lot of the insecurities and so forth that's within people. And then that starts to conflict inside of them and they try to find other ways to escape that. Do you see?
Yeah.
And then those ways they're trying to use to escape that are just used to create more options for consumerism and so forth. No actual solution.
Mm-hmm.
If everybody had what they needed, how could you manipulate people? How could you control people?
Would you even want to meditate?
You wouldn't need to.
If
Everyone meditates in response to being hurt.
Yeah.
Everyone meditates in response to your thoughts running rampant and feeling anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
If you had no anxiety, where does anxiety come from? Insecurity. Not trusting another person, feeling like if you don't compete, you won't survive. So imagine if nothing you do is ever going to change that insecurity that you feel. You can cover it up. Guess what? You can become the most positive, love and light person that ever existed. You know what's going to happen? You're going to get cancer. That's what's going to happen.
Why do you say that?
Because you're just going to an extreme. That's all you're doing. You're not changing anything in reality. You're not making the environment less toxic.
Mm-hmm.
And physical reality is going to look at you and go, dude, you're fucking around. Come back to Earth. We need to wake you up.
You need to focus on what's real, like what's actually affecting you.
Yes. So the only purpose that's going to give you the satisfaction that you're looking for, the stability, the no anxiety, is to have the purpose of creating a system that's best for everybody. Because the reason you have these anxieties and insecurities is because who you are is at odds with who you need to be to not have them. But you're not going to change it. If your goal is just to fix the feeling, you're not changing who you are. Do you see what I'm saying? The only way to change who you are is to focus on going into the areas that you're not capable of actually being effective within. You see what I'm saying?
Mm.
It's like, who would you have to be a senator who stands up in the Senate and says, these are the laws that we should pass that would actually benefit everybody and doesn't hurt anybody. That doesn't mean you go and pass a law that says tax all the billionaires 50% of their wealth. That would hurt them. You don't need to do that. So I'm not advocating that. You'd have to be a little bit more creative than that. But who would you have to be to stand up and everybody's like, communist, you communist? Even though what you're saying is not. Because right now there aren't any, no one's doing that. I'm not saying there's anyone who's actually doing this. Yeah. But who would you have to be able to stand up and do that? Your communication skills would have to be at another level. So I'm just giving you one example. It's like you would have to you'd have to challenge yourself. You'd have to change. You'd have to actually focus on what would be best. Because if you don't, it's like the thing that people are trying to escape from going from religion to spirituality is fear of death. Because they saw through the bullshit that clearly there's no place that God's going to guarantee you. Like, if I don't want God to control my life, then I have to reject God. But now he didn't guarantee that I can live forever.
Right.
So I'm just going to believe that I live forever, and I'm just going to go to the next plane of existence. But the reality is, if you don't change who you are to be somebody who always does what's best for all, you're just not going to exist anymore. So it's like the thing you're trying to avoid by not facing reality, you're creating that. And really, if you study the destiny material and you go into it, it's not like something you have to believe. It's just, it lays everything out very clearly for yourself. So you can start to understand what I'm saying is like the reality of where we're at. Like, otherwise you just don't think there's any reality. And it's just, you just make it up as you go. But literally that person is totally lost. Like they're not going to hear anything we're saying. And I don't even.
They wouldn't have gotten this far.
Yeah. I mean, you're probably not listening to this anyways, but I'm just saying, like, if you want to take that route of like, well, but that's just your version of things. It's like, there's only one reality. There's only one reality. I mean, there's only one reality of how food gets to the grocery store. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you don't just wake up in the morning and meditate and that's how food goes to the grocery store. So that when you show up there and you buy it, it's because you meditated that day.
Right.
It's because of a whole system of supply chains of people going to work and doing all this stuff. Like, there's a physical process and it only works one way. So there is no multiple ways there's only one way. There's only one way to actually continue existing, is to change yourself to always do what's best for all. Because then that collective source that you believe in says, you know what? This part of ourselves needs to continue existing because it adds value. Don't you think if the universe was all loving, that's what it would do? If it was truly loving, it would say, you know what? I'm so loving that I love reality so much that I'm only going to allow that which is best for all of reality. I'm not going to anymore allow any of the negative elements that are just here to take and not give and not change and only suck and only destroy.
Cameron's speaking as the universe right now.
Well, I'm just saying, if you're only focused on you feeling good and you're not willing to consider the consequences of that, is not that you shouldn't feel good. You see what I'm saying? I'm not saying people should feel bad, but we haven't yet created the conditions to make that a reality for everybody.
Yeah.
And it's like a wake-up call. It's like, we haven't created those conditions. So everything you're trying to do to feel good is actually just a reaction to the fact that the conditions are such that we're not creating that automatically. So if you want to get that, you have to create it. We have to work together. We can't do it ourselves. We don't have amongst us right now enough political weight to make a difference in the system to be able to actually change the laws and so forth that are not, you know what I mean? Like, people, these like native people want to protest the pipeline. It's like, okay, you can protest that for a while, but how long are you going to be able to last? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you're just focused on this one little tiny thing. Eventually you're going to lose. You have to have much more political power than that to actually have the starting point of government, of laws, of corporations, of everything be, hey, let's actually consider what's best. But the major, most important part of that is educating generations of children to have basic common sense and to be able to process information.
Oh, I think you froze.
No, dramatic pause. Everybody hold tight. So that they can process information so they don't go into all this bullshit.
Yeah.
So they can't be convinced that reality is something that exists in your mind. Cameron, you cut out as soon as you said educating generations of children so that they can process information.
So that they're not always looking for an authority,
Right.
because the authorities don't know anything more than anybody else.
And why would
Just
they have
because
why would they have your best interest in mind if it's a competitive system?
the people at the top are the most competitive. They're not the smartest. They're not the best, well understood of. That's like they're not the people who understand reality the best. It's like, think about your high school. Think about the people who got to the top. So probably not hard for you, Asif, because you're that guy.
It's you.
But I'm trying to say, like, everybody think about when you were in high school, the people who got the best grades. Were they the best people?
No.
They're just the people who were really good at school.
Yeah.
That's your experts.
And looking back now, I'm like, whoa, I was really fucking dumb. I was like, compared to what I could see of what was real and actually process things, I was like, man, if that's the height, like, I don't care about me. I'm just looking at if the output of what is held at the highest, like, oh, that person is the height of the system. I'm like, man, holy shit. That's really bad. If that's the state of the union, oh, fuck.
Nice. All right. So let's give some practical, like what can we actually do? You know,
The
what can be done
process of
about it? Yeah.
the process of walking yourself out of your mind and into reality requires you to understand the difference. And really think about this. This is like a process that Cameron's doing with his children of, like, they read a book and, this person's flying around in the book and he's saying, like, now, Max, flying around, all that stuff. Is that real or is that just pretend? And now Max can differentiate. No, that's just pretend, but can we pretend? Yeah, sure. As long as we're clear. It's like, yeah, let's fly around. Right. But it's like, we didn't have that as children. So you have to realize that what's embedded inside of you, what comes unconsciously, competently, what comes automatically for you is not, oh, I see reality clearly. It's like everything's a mishmash and you can't tell what's real and what's not. So the whole point of the destiny process is for you to have the vocabulary to identify what's going on inside of you and how to work with it, right? And being able to distinguish that between what actually has an effect in the world, right? And so going through that process, you'll realize it's not about how you feel. It's about only if how you feel is affecting what you do and how you come up in the world. And the problem you're going to run into is you're going to listen to all of this stuff and you're going to interpret it as, you're not going to interpret it as, I need to do exactly what they're doing and make a difference and stand up and build myself in the context of making money, communicating more effectively, changing the system. It's like, you'll say, okay, I need to become the best version of myself, but what are you using to measure that? That's the problem that you're going to run into. You're not going to have any kind of tangible, real evidence of your change. And what we're suggesting is, if you actually look at what we're saying, if you look at the process that we're talking about, if you look at all the fucking, what episode is this? Like 26, 27 or something like
25.
that? 25. It's like, over the last 25 episodes, if the conclusion that you didn't draw after, like, listening to two of them is, oh shit, I need to do stuff, I need to change the system myself, you personally, then you can't process information. You went to public school, you went through the school system, and you were programmed to just listen to stuff, be able to repeat it back somewhere. So you could be like, yo, guys, listen to this. This is pretty cool what I heard on the podcast or whatever the case may be. But you can't get any real results in life. And what we're saying is, that's why we have these tools, because they actually work, because I'm the living proof of that. The research is, you're listening to the research right here. And Destiny has all that research. I was programmed to be nothing, to be like just a point in the system that doesn't actually end up doing anything. But I was talking to somebody yesterday and they're saying, yeah, it's like my life is meaningless, right? It's like, I'm not in a position to do anything, but that's how a slave thinks. It's like this world was here before and it's going to be here after. This plantation was here before me. It's going to be here after. That's not how a slave master thinks. A slave master is like, shit, dude. Like if I die, like they're all screwed. Or if I shut down the plantation, they're all screwed. I'm providing for them. Right. So I'm saying it's like, what's the difference between you and the person, not the slave owner, but I mean somebody in the system, because there are people in the system who believe their life has an effect. That's why Bill Gates is doing everything he's doing. What this process is becoming equal to that so that you can have an effect. Now, if you don't believe you can do that, it's because you're not using the tools. TechnoTutor, the Destiny Eye process, and then researching and talking with people about it. And the second part of it, if you don't believe that it can be done, it's for the same fucking reason. It's because you can't process information. Because in the same way that these things were created by human beings, we'll just use the same principles to create something new. Because somebody gave birth to the fucking forefathers who then signed the Declaration of Independence, and now they're like, oh yeah, like we can do our own shit now. Somebody gave birth to that kid who was like, oh, I can't make a difference, but I'll have a kid, you know? But because they raised that kid in a particular way, that kid had the confidence to be like, yo, let's get together and let's run this shit. I'm saying if you're listening to this, you're that person. It's your responsibility. If you've listened this far, it's your responsibility to figure out what the fuck we're talking about through going to self-perfected.com, looking at the principles, joining the Facebook group, talking to people and being like, okay, what are you guys talking about? Like, let me get more detail. Like if you find yourself reacting to any part of this, of like, if you're still religious and you're like, whoa, or you're still really spiritual and you believe that love is the answer, it's like, don't take it personally because we don't know you. We don't know if you're listening to this. We're not attacking you. But we all came from the place with these ideas inside of us, thinking that that's what's important. And over time, because we've expanded ourselves and studied and pushed ourselves a lot, we realized they weren't the answer. Consider that maybe there's something to that, right? Drakey?
Yeah, I just want to add to that. If you don't, you do some other bullshit that's just based on your feelings, you will die. That's it. You will die, and you will not be part of the actual love that you profess that you want to see so bad in this world. You're not going to be a part of it because you're not actually doing it. You're not actually living it.
Right.
Yeah.
You're not allowing for it to happen.
If you actually love this world and you love reality, you love children, you would support them to make sure that they have the tools to free themselves. Because the only other alternative is just to totally accept the system. So if you believe the universe, the source of it is all love, you understand that's not the same thing as the system that runs this world. That's an economic system which doesn't fucking care about anybody. It's like the opposite of love. But if you really love, if you really are coming from, in other words, think about this. If you're saying the source of everything is love, what is your source? Where are you coming from? What is your starting point? And if you are equal to the source of everything, which is love, then you would be coming from that same starting point. And instead of expecting the universe to love you, which would imply you're not coming from the source, you're separate from it. You see what I'm saying? If you're actually coming from it, you would be operating from that same starting point, and you would actually do whatever is required to change the system.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be looking for a savior. You would become that. But you would also have to understand some basic points of common sense, which is that you can't do it on your own. So you challenge those points in your ego. That's like, I want to be the one, the savior, get all the attention. Just be a part of our group. There's really no other way to make a difference in this world. This whole pandemic, all this stuff has proven that. The only way is to educate everybody so they're not manipulated by all the bullshit that's going on. They actually see like, hey, I can stand up and I can create a world that's best for everybody, where nobody has to have anything taken from them, and we don't have to live in constant fear of each other. There's nothing else that you can do other than what we are doing that is going to change that. This is the only thing. So the sooner you realize that, then the sooner you can actually start on the path of having a real purpose. And if you can just let go of that ego point of, well, I have to give myself my own purpose. You can't. It's like you're in a world that you didn't yourself in this particular life create. So to think that you can give yourself your own purpose, you just magically make up, it's like you're not even here in reality. Your purpose should be what actually needs to be done. And if you can't give yourself that purpose, you're not actually in control. Free choice is not, I could just choose something random. I'm just going to choose something random because I have free choice. That means you don't actually have choice. You're controlled by the point of, well, I can't choose something that makes sense because then I don't have free choice. Free choice is actually seeing what makes sense and having the ability to, even if it's not comfortable, choose that. Choosing based on your feelings is not actual free choice. That's the choice that a robot would make. This is like our opportunity as individuals to stand up and say, even though we are physically like organic robots, we can also still choose to do what's best. Because as the robots, we haven't been programmed to do that. It's like the only choice you can make to prove that you really are free is to do that.
Yeah.
And you don't have any excuses that you're allowed to hold on to because, well, we didn't. We had to walk through all this bullshit inside of us that told us to quit and told us to like, no, I should do my own thing because my own thing is like better or cooler or whatever. So the proof of you can do it is that we did it. And we still have a lot more points to go through. But the point is like, you don't have to be afraid of that because I guarantee you that once you let go of the beliefs that you're holding on to and look at what actually makes sense in reality, your life is going to work better. You're not like sacrificing. You're sacrificing your bullshit in your like the feeling of significance and superiority. But then through that, you'll actually understand how things work. And then people can't fuck with you. And then you'll be unshakable. And then you'll make a lot of money. And then your relationships will go really well because you actually understand reality, which is way better than just being in La La Land. Right?
Nice. Yeah.
All right.
So-
Go to self-perfected.com. A lot of sweet stuff there. We also have a store now, which we'll put up there at some point. But otherwise, if you're not in the Facebook group, get in the Facebook group. If you are in the Facebook group, then this is your calling to push yourself way more than you have been. If you haven't been making if you haven't made a live video yet, make a live video for the group. If you've made live videos for the group, but you haven't posted on your personal profile yet, do it because I guarantee you when you start doing that, you're going to start pushing yourself to a whole new level. And you'll be able to become somebody who can handle whatever comes with that. So use this as your permission slip to start pushing yourself more. Reach out to me, reach out to Drake, reach out to Mitchell, reach out to Kian. And if you're not clear on what to do to get involved and to get to the next step, reach out and we'll support you with that. Just the same way that we were supported. That's what we're here for, right? So self-perfected.com. And till next time.
Peace.
Yep.